IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Saturday. You all know what that means. It is time for the RTCF show. For those who are newcomers, it had been a while before last week that we had done this. RTCF. We couldn't think of a better name, and it just kind of flowed. Recruiting, team, college football. So we'll talk about a Notre Dame recruiting topic. We'll talk about a Notre Dame college football topic, and then we will talk about, a Notre Dame team topic, and the Notre Dame or a college football topic that a lot of times obviously applies to Notre Dame, but it's not so much just about Notre Dame. Sean, normally we'll kick it off with kind of the recruiting topic, but today I want to start off with the team topic because this is something that I've been wanting to talk about really since, for a while, but I wanted to see how everything shook out this offseason first. And for the most part, we know what this Notre Dame coaching staff is going to look like. I'm sure there's going to some analysts are going to get added. I don't see any other big moves with some of the stuff that's been released, and obviously that could change. There could be something that comes down the pike for one of the assistants that changes the game a little bit. But as of right now, we feel like we know where this coaching staff is going to be, and this has been a very interesting offseason because we are seeing Notre Dame do a lot of things that there's been a lot of criticism in the past that they were unwilling to do, and so we're going to kind of go through it all. And each thing happening this year, the other year, may not seem a whole lot, but the fact so much of it is happening right now, to me, says a lot about Notre Dame and a lot about Marcus Freeman and some other aspects to it. And I want to dive into that today, Sean. So that'll be the first topic. We'll talk about some must-gets in the recruiting class that, Sean and I believe are program changers, like definers, like just a lot of different aspects of why they're must-gets. And then we're going to talk about a question that we got. I believe Jason Smith was the one that asked this earlier in the week, Sean. And he asked it during one of my solo shows. And I was like, off the top of my head, I have some ideas. But I was like, this would be a great RTCF topic. So I wrote it down, and I was like, let's do it. So we have the list. We went through and we wrote down every Power 5 play coordinator combination where we included head coaches in places where the head coach is actually the play caller. So we'll dive into that. And we have our top 5 of who we think are the top 5 coordinator combinations in college football. And then we'll also talk about, the teams that kind of are next in line for us. And it'll be my top 5. Sean will have his top 5. We have not compared top 5 notes right now. We're going to kind of have some fun and kind of lay it out as we go. And then we'll talk about some coordinator duos that are like next in line. And then I have a list of coordinator tandem, Sean, that I kind of got my eye on for 2025 that I want to see how they do this year. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. But first and foremost, Sean, topic number 1, Notre Dame has had a very interesting offseason. And I'll be honest, it's an offseason that I didn't think we were going to ever really see from Notre Dame. And here's what I mean by that. Notre Dame has been very bold over the last year. Notre Dame has also been very willing to spend a lot of money in recent months. Now, the pushback we get from people on campus is, well, we've always done this. No, you haven't. You can say that all you want, but they've never been like this. And it says something. It's not just about, oh, we have the best coordinator combination, or, oh, they kept this good coach, or, oh, they kept this good coach. There's a lot of things that have happened back to back to back to back to back to back. And to me, it says something about Notre Dame, but it also says something about Marcus Freeman. And I want to get into that a little bit. And so let's first kind of go through, Sean, and we'll list just the things that have happened and then kind of dive into more of the specifics of what they mean kind of individually and then as a whole. So number 1, during this season, Notre Dame, or kind of during the summer and into the season, Notre Dame signs a new apparel deal with Under Armour. During the season, it's announced that Notre Dame has signed a 5-year extension with NBC. Now, we were never given the numbers, but I've talked to a few people, and I haven't written anything about this because I want to be very clear. These are, this person heard it from this person, heard it from this person. So it's not like reputable from a reporting standpoint. But I can at least say that I feel comfortable saying that Notre Dame at least doubled their total TV revenue package, at least doubled. And some of the numbers I've heard close to triple, not quite, but close to triple, where in the past years it's been about 26 to 27 million in recent years is total between what they're getting from NBC and then from ESPN through the ACC deal.
Yeah.
If what I'm hearing is correct, that number's closer to 65 to 68 moving forward. So there's a lot more money flowing into the program that is there to spend. And I think that has to be considered for this whole thing too. But let's go through what's happened. So that happened before, like during the season. Since the season ended, Chancey Stuckey got fired and was replaced by Mike Brown. Mike Denbrock got hired from LSU. Dylan McCullough got a promotion from just running backs coach, run game coordinator, to now he's the running backs coach and associate head coach. Al Golden on defense gets signed to an extension. Sean, you and I have talked about it was assumed he was gone.
Yeah.
Sources that I had at Notre Dame assumed he was gone after the season. Number 2, Mike Mickens gets a promotion. Now, what a lot of people don't know, because it hasn't been reported, is Mike Mickens actually already agreed to stay at Notre Dame for a pay raise this offseason. Now, I don't know that the pay is going to go even higher, but he's now going to be promoted to the entire secondary coach. I would expect Notre Dame to kind of get a GA to be back there with him. Anytime it's like, that's why you always have a D-line GA, because you have to separate at times D tackles from D ends, and you need a coach that can go do a good job. And Notre Dame's always had a good D-line GA, or always had a D-line GA. Now, I think you're going to see that now with Mike Mickens. So at times, if he needs to go work with the corners, you've got a GA that can work with the safeties, or the other way around. That's how I would prefer to see it. And then now Max Bulla is going to be promoted to a full-time coaching position, coaching the linebackers. Also, off the field, you had a lot of analysts coming with Denbrock from LSU. Trenton Miles is the big one for me, because he was the receivers coach back at Notre Dame in 02 to 04. You and I have said before, that 2002 to 2004 Notre Dame teams, they were very well coached from a fundamental standpoint in a lot of areas. Mike Denbrock was on that staff. There were some good position coaches on that staff. They just weren't coordinated very well, and the head coach wasn't any good, at least for what Notre Dame needed him to be. And so you bring Trent Miles in, who has been a head coach at the FBS level at Georgia State. He got there from doing a good job at Indiana State, which is his alma mater. So now he's an analyst. Hey, get a veteran guy, a proven track record as an analyst. Well, they got one. And then, of course, you had Hunter Bivens' brother. I don't know anything about him. I don't know what he's done. I don't know how good of a hire that is. I have no clue. All I know is Mike Denbrock knows him, and that matters to me. I wouldn't care one bit about that hire if he just brought him from LSU for no reason whatsoever. I would have assumed, like, well, it's Hunter Bivens' brother. I don't know a lot about him, and I'd move right on. But when you think about the fact that Mike Denbrock has worked with this guy the last couple of years, clearly he knows something for them to bring him in as a senior analyst on offense. So you have all this stuff going on, Sean. And look, Notre Dame is spending a lot of money. From what I'm told, Notre Dame will have arguably the highest paid coordinator duo in all of college football, if not the highest. I believe that there are an OC or two that have gotten promotions this offseason that might make more than Mike Denbrock. There might be a DC or two that makes more than Al Golden from what he's going to get. There is really nobody to me. I don't know if there's any team that's going to have two coordinators making well over $2 million. I don't know that's going to happen. And the fact that Sean, it wasn't that long ago, 14, 15, when it was reported that Brian Van Gore is making $1 million. And I remember hearing from one of the offensive coaches being like, hey, look, the OC at Notre Dame is not making anything close to that. That was less than 10 years ago. And now both of your coordinators are making over $2 million. That's a lot of money to spend. Mike Mickens basically turned down any DC conversations this offseason because of what Notre Dame's paying him and the things that they've talked about doing with him. Mike Brown, the receivers coach, was, I think, 11th or 12th among the highest paid receiver coaches in college football, and was an assistant head coach at Wisconsin. You got him to come to Notre Dame as just the receivers coach. I promise you, he did not take a pay cut to do that. Right. And then Dylan McCullough also is a guy that is a very coveted assistant coach that you got to stay. You didn't do that because you have a nice smile. Right? You did that because he likes it here, but also because you paid him. Notre Dame shelled out a lot of money this offseason, Sean? And I know the easy answer is, well, they were embarrassed by what happened last year. I think there's something to that. I don't think that's the reason they're doing all the things they're doing. I think there's more to it than that, Sean. And first, I want to get into the big picture, and then I want to dive into what does this mean for the football team. But let's first talk big picture, Sean. What does it say about Notre Dame? First of all, why do we think Notre Dame is doing this? And I think the first reason is, Sean, is Notre Dame runs their school like a business, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean that in a positive manner. Notre Dame doesn't just spend money just to spend money, right? Notre Dame turned a, was it like $11-12 billion endowment into a $20 million endowment with smart business investments. I believe, Sean, that the number one reason why this is happening is they view Marcus Freeman as a good investment, whereas before they didn't view the previous head coach as the same kind of investment. Because here, I feel like you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck, so to speak, with Marcus Freeman. I think that has to be where this conversation starts.
That's a perfect way to start off. He's earned that respect in multiple ways, in my opinion. Look, this is a first-time head coach trying to learn the ropes of college football at Notre Dame. That is a very difficult task, right? He has to evolve as a head coach, and I'm glad he said what he said at his introductory press conference. Question everything. That has been one of his biggest strengths as he's evolved as a head coach, because head coaching just isn't on game day. Like, you're managing a lot of different things as a head coach and trying to figure it out, right? So just take, for example, the immediacy of how he realized this quarterback room isn't going to be it. I'm going to have to upgrade the talent, and I'm going to have to find a way to upgrade it, not just through recruiting, but through the portal as well. Then on top of that, coming into a tough situation where if he had been given full autonomy to select his coaching staff, it probably wouldn't look the way it looked initially. He dealt with that, and things happened that actually played into his favor. I think there are certain times he's also stood in front of the cameras and took the heat when he didn't have to for the program.
Yes.
There are a lot of.
Are you talking about for Jack last year with the Ludwig thing?
There you go. Yeah. That look, he has shown himself to be trustworthy off the field from an administration executive standpoint, and he has shown that he has grown as a head coach and that the direction of the program is going in the right way. All of those factors make him somebody worthy of investing into, right? So some of the things that might be taking place now that we've heard about, just facilities, for instance, with some of the things that his predecessor complained about on the way out the door. But his predecessor had done so many tricky things to make Jack think like, yo, do you really want to be here?
What do you mean by tricky thing, Sean? Like always having his name mentioned for other head coaching jobs after every single freaking season? Do you mean something like that? Is that what you're referring to, Sean?
I'm trying to be nice here today. I'm trying to be nice to start the show. Don't get me riled off.
Nope.
Riled up early.
Nope.
But absolutely. You know, so why would Jack go ahead and give him that when he could be leaving? So I think what you said was spot on. Notre Dame, and as much as we joked about it, they are an institution, a university that is about good stewardship. And that should be applauded, right? And most fans would love to have a team or a university that's frivolous and just spins, right? That's not Notre Dame. That's just not Notre Dame. But
at least not with sports.
Right. And for the fact that they are investing in coaches, right, is huge, because in this landscape, you have to be able to invest in facilities and coaches. The one thing that I'm actually cool with, that they've taken a back seat and allowed the landscape to kind of play itself out, is the NIL thing. I'm fine with that. That is really good stewardship. And it plays into the recruiting, because when you talk to their top recruits, they're on board. And the majority of the recruits, I mean, you might have a few that might have some different mindsets, or might be they're teenagers. They can wake up tomorrow and feel totally different. But for the most part, they're recruiting guys and getting commitments from guys that want to be at Notre Dame with the full understanding of what Notre Dame is and what it represents and what the expectations are. So, I will say this. Brian Kelly, in theory, was right. And Notre Dame, you do have to shop down a different aisle. But that does not give you the right to be lazy in that. Notre Dame has a different type of kid. The different types of kids that come to Notre Dame. So for me, that's a different aisle. It's not like you go to he was making it seem like you have to go to a totally different grocery store.
Well, yes, or you have to go down to the bargain aisle.
Right.
That's the difference.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't even, where I would say, here's where I would frame it, Sean. I don't think they have to shop down a different aisle. I think they have to be more selective about the products they go after in that aisle. Right. So to me, Notre Dame is going after the best players, but they're saying, hey, look, we don't want that kid, or we can't get that kid. But we're still going after the Georgias, the Bamas, the Texases, the USCs, the Ohio States. We're still going to go after those kids. The other part, too, is they're winning more of those battles. Notre Dame would have bowed out of Kingston Viliama-Asa's recruitment the minute that it became obvious that Ohio State was ahead of them in the past. And they would have given us some spin about, well, just wasn't a great fit or couldn't get in. I can't tell how many times Notre Dame would recruit a kid for 6 months, be all in, and then they'd start to fade. And all of a sudden, the kid had magical academic issues that he had to deal with. You know what I mean? Or there was some attitude fit that we had to hear about that had never been creeped in before when you thought you were going to get that kid. Right. And they would have bowed out Gerby Lambert's the guy that probably would have gotten the pass because Harry would have still got him. But when you look at him and you look at some of these other guys that Notre Dame has landed, and we'll get into this in the must get thing, it's hey, we're shopping down that same aisle, but we're going to battle those teams. And I think that circles back to another reason that I think Notre Dame is willing to invest in Marcus Freeman and is willing to say, hey, we think he can get us our bang for our buck. It's like this. You're not going to give me your money to invest, Sean, because we're friends and you trust me. Because I don't know I wouldn't know what to do with it, right? Like that's not my thing. So if you're going to invest money into someone or something, or you're going to give this person money and say, now go do something with it, you have to trust that person has the ability to turn that money into something better. And this is what we've said for years. If you spend the money the right way, you will win, and the money coming back into the program will be exponentially greater than the money you spent. That's the reality. So you had to up your payroll, so to speak, to your staff this year, but you go out and win, make the playoff every year, win a couple titles the next decade. All of a sudden, every single position you have is paid for by some big donor who desperately wants to get his name tied to a position group. And I don't mean that insultingly. I think that's a cool thing, right? I mean, that the coaches have to do their job, players have to do their job, and the money people need to do their job. And if they want to say, hey, look, I'm giving you this to help you build this, and all I'm asking for is that my name gets put on, the thing as the whatever head coach, I actually have no problem with that. You know what I mean? But they feel he's worth the investment because they think we don't know yet if Marcus Freeman has the chops to be a championship head coach. We don't. But here's what we know. Number one, he's a great representative of the university. That matters. Number two, he's gonna work. And that was not always true of the previous head coach. You've had players that have said he would welcome us back in the winter for when we get back from winter break, and we wouldn't see him again until like a week or two before spring ball. Wouldn't see him. That's not true of this current head coach. And so there's that aspect of it as well. And so to me, I believe that that's why he's worth the investment. And I think he's shown there have been some bumps along the road football-wise, but I think this season showed enough progress to say, hey, we don't know if he's got the chops to win, but he's shown us enough to say we're not going to stand in his way. And the smart thing is if Marcus Freeman's not that guy, you're going to know that in the next 2-3 years. But whoever you replace him with is going to say, dude, Notre Dame's committed to spending. It becomes a far more attractive job. You're not going to be where you were in 2004, after 2004, where Urban Meyer was like, why would I want to go there when they're not committed to winning? terrible facilities, don't pay anything, or I can go here to Florida and they're fully bought in. Now Notre Dame's like, hey, we're fully bought in. We just need the right guy leading this thing. So my thing is, it's smart to do even if Coach Freeman doesn't lead you to the promised land. But I believe he also has shown enough chops from a coaching standpoint, Sean, to say, hey, it's worth it. Because we do know he's going to do these things really well over here. He's going to be a great representative of the university. I mean, people meet Marcus Freeman and they're like, I'm ready to spend my money on that program because this guy's charmed me. The whole recruiting pitch just isn't for moms and dads and recruits. It's also for that big money donor that has been hesitant to commit to the school or the program in the past. You know what it's like, Sean. You've been around him a little bit. You just listen to him talk and you're like, dude, I want to go run through a wall right now. Like, I want to go play for that guy right now. Like I've heard him, we're walking off the field and he's giving a speech. He's ticked about something in practice. I'm like, dude, that's how I want to hear my head coach talk. When we're not bringing it, that as the leader of the team, when I was a court, that's how I want to hear my head coach respond to the practice we just saw. Absolutely. And so I just think all those things factor into it, Sean. So the school's committed, but here's the other thing. It's not just the school. And here's where you start getting a little bit of confidence that maybe Marcus Freeman does have it. Because you're seeing coaches like Dylan McCullough, who's been a part of a Super Bowl winning team, worked for Andy Reid, right? You've got Al Golden and his expertise, his background. You've got these coaches that have this experience that are saying, yeah, I want to be here. That says something to me. You don't think Dylan McCullough knows what a championship caliber coach looks like? You don't think he knows what a top-notch head coach looks like? Do you really think he's just going to stay at Notre Dame just because they give him a pay raise with the opportunities that you and I both know that he has? No. There's a belief that, hey, we can do this. Al Golden, flat out, if he wanted to, could be a D coordinator in the NFL. He could have some of these head coaching jobs that came open, he could have been considered. From what I'm told, he didn't really put his name in the hat with some of those head coaching jobs that came about because I think he likes it at Notre Dame, let's be honest. But the other part is he doesn't do that if he doesn't believe I can win with this guy, because you're going to hurt your career. Hey, if I stay with Freeman too long and all of a sudden, the warts get shown and we're not going to be what I think we can be. The fact that these guys all want to stay here and work with him says a lot. The fact that Mike Denbrock was willing to walk away from Brian Kelly to go work with Marcus Freeman and work for Marcus Freeman, who he spent 4 years with, tells me he sees something in him. Mike Denbrock was making really good money at LSU, folks. He did not have to leave. He did not leave. He turned down more money. I was told this by someone at LSU that's a really good contact. He turned down a much bigger contract at Texas A&M to stay at LSU. Because Mike Elko tried to hire him at Texas A&M, and he turned it down. Big deal. He didn't leave Notre Dame simply because they upped their offer. He came here because he believes in Marcus Freeman. There's some other factors that convinced him to leave, but the only reason he's leaving to come here, if it was all about the money, he would have gone to Texas A&M because it is easier there and to coach there as an assistant coach. So I think all those things factor in too, Sean, that there's also a belief amongst the staff, and you're finally seeing Marcus Freeman. This is the most surrounded I think he'll ever be with people that are going to have his back because they're people that now know him. Even the two new coaches that they added have actually spent more time with him than the coaches who are on the current staff that have only been with him the last 2 years, right? I mean, Mike Brown was with him for what, 3 years, two or 3 years at Cincinnati. Mike Denbrock was with him for 4 years at Cincinnati. So you've added guys to the staff that they know him. They've worked with him. There's a buy-in there that was not necessarily there the first year. It was a little bit more. It was more there in year 2. Jared Parker had Marcus Freeman's back. He was bought into Marcus Freeman's thing. But what you've done is not only have buy-in, but you've significantly upgraded. And the other thing too is there's some moves that were made that tell us that Marcus Freeman's not playing around anymore. You don't get rid of Chancey Stuckey for the things we know he got rid of for if you're not engaged in your program. If you're not bought into saying this is the way we're going to do it, and I don't like how this season went. You don't move on from certain things if you're not bought into that. And we didn't even talk, and I forgot to even talk about Lauren Lando. I forgot to even mention that one because that did not cost. That was not cheap. to get he
No.
runs a private training business that NFL Super Bowl champs, first-round draft picks pay him a lot of money to train them. He did not come to Notre Dame for $400,000. Right, you know what I mean? And no commitment to upgrading the facilities. So that's another big one. But that's the thing too, Sean, is you're in a situation where he was not happy with how this season went at all. Marcus Freeman knows. I'm not giving you my opinion per se. I'm giving you conversation I've had. He was not happy with how this season went at all. He knows. And important.
Did you agree?
Know that they missed an opportunity this year, Sean.
Post-game Clemson was like the turn. I think that post-game after the Clemson loss, for me, it was like, oh, this dude, okay.
I think it started against Louisville.
I can see that.
Clemson was the final, I think the final straw.
The final straw, yeah.
Last two regular season games, Sean, you and I have talked about this. If all you did during those two games was watch Marcus Freeman, you'd have thought Notre Dame was getting their butt kicked.
Mm-hmm.
When he went off on Audric Estime because Jabron Payne fumbled, it said, okay, this cat's like,
yeah.
He's so what we've seen from Marcus Freeman's first 2 years is he's made rookie mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
He has. But what you've also seen is he's not going to accept them. And he's not going to keep making the same mistake, right? And he's willing to make some tough moves to get on from it. And so spent a lot of money to bring in certain guys, but it's not just about he went out and got Mike Denbrock, who ran the #1 offense in college football, just because he had the #1. No, he's worked with Mike Denbrock. He has won with Mike Denbrock. They were coordinators for 2 years together on a team that in a 2-year span had 2 losses. They lost by less than a field goal. I think it was a point to Georgia, and they lost in the college football playoff to Bama. That's the only teams that beat the Marcus Freeman, Mike Denbrock-led teams for 2 years at Cincinnati. That's it. And with all due respect, Cincinnati was a whole lot more competitive against Alabama in 2021 than Notre Dame was against them in 2020. That's where we're at. That's what they've done. And it tells me, Sean, that this team so yes, there's a commitment to Marcus Freeman, but for what? What's the end game? Because I believe that Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame knows there is a window opening up. And I think that the fact that they've been as competitive as they have been in NIL has made them realize, hey, this new era actually benefits us. Let's take advantage. I think that factors into this whole conversation as well, Sean.
And then, just the chat is always wonderful. And I think the fact, I'll just answer it this way. The fact that we're having this conversation and we're excited about Notre Dame doing things lets you know that Notre Dame is different and not like everybody else. See, the head coach at we're talking about the university that fired Lou Holtz, not because of what he was doing as a head coach, because the administration just didn't like it.
Right.
They felt like the program was getting too big.
They fought against him.
That doesn't happen that doesn't happen to Nick Saban. That doesn't happen to Kirby Smart. That's someone always told me. And Notre Dame, it's the coach, and he has to answer to somebody, and then the administrator, Jack Swarbrick, has to answer to somebody. It's like it's different. The way things run in Notre Dame from a football standpoint is unlike any other big time program. It's just
Gordon
different.
G let the cat out of the bag a few years ago when he was at Ohio State, because he said something as an offhanded joke. It was over a decade ago now, probably about 15 years ago now. That is true at Ohio State and a lot of other places. They were talking about firing Jim Tressel, and his comment was, "I'm hoping Jim Tressel doesn't fire me." Right? If somebody tries to stand in Nick Saban's way when he was at Bama, that guy's gone.
He's gone.
He's gone. If they try to stand in the way of the football program, you're out. If the administration, now there are some schools where the administration has tried to fight against the sports programs, and all of a sudden, these random things start getting accused of this guy, Michigan, and he's out. Right? I mean, so there are some places where that has happened. But when you talk about who Notre Dame is going against, Sean, to your point, Marcus Freeman can't demand the president be gone or the AD be gone. He doesn't have that kind of power, because if the head coach of Notre Dame had that, Jack Swarbrick would have been fired, because Brian Kelly needed somebody to blame, for his failure. So to me, it tells us that this school, and people will say, oh, this is Pete Vivacqua written all over it. I hope so. I hope it does. I hope Pete Vivacqua has been a player in some of this, but let's not pretend like Jack Swarbrick hasn't been leading to this direction over time. He handled the facilities part, and again, I know that it's not that Notre Dame. I just don't even want to get into the thing that happened last year, because it's been turned into something that it wasn't. It was terrible. It was embarrassing and stupid, but it wasn't what it thought. But there is something different this offseason. Notre Dame has been trending up with salaries, but I can assure you, I sat down with some people around Notre Dame a year ago, and there was a frustration that they had to wait for schools to express interest. And at times I was told with a couple coaches, as soon as they got any interest, that they would then go to the administration because, hey, I want to stay, but to get pay raises, because they weren't getting them otherwise. This offseason, Notre Dame was very proactive in this and not waiting around for guys to get offers and things like that before they left. Like Chris O'Leary had nothing to do with money. Nothing to do with money. You and I have known this for a couple of years, Sean. Chris O'Leary always had an eye towards the NFL.
Yeah.
This is the same with Brian Mason last year. Brian Mason never gave Notre Dame a chance to match.
To counter a match,
because it didn't matter. It wasn't about money. It was about the dream opportunity. An Indianapolis guy who grew up a Colts fan had a chance to go coach with the Colts. So the fact that you're not seeing coaches really leave for lateral moves in an offseason where a lot of teams are losing coaches to lateral moves, I think says a lot about the faith that these players have in Marcus Freeman. But at the end of the day, they're still parents. They're still husbands that have families to support. And if the dollars were way different, they couldn't make that move. So the fact that they are says that there's a combination of a commitment to the program, to winning, combined with a faith in the guy leading the program. I think that's different. Yeah. That's new. That's something we haven't experienced a whole lot. That combination of things, Sean, is not something, because as you said, I think you nailed it. Lou Holtz was good enough to win more than one title.
Oh, absolutely.
But he wasn't good enough to have to beat Miami, Florida State, Michigan, and the administration of University of Notre Dame. That's the problem.
Yes.
And this administration, for a lot of the issues I have with it in a lot of other ways, some football related, some not football related, the fact is right now, they're not standing in the way of the football program. They're saying, hey, this is what you need, go do it. And look, I can assure you this started not just with football. No, it was not cheap to get Micah Shrewsbury away from Penn State with the basketball program. I promise you that. It was not cheap. So I do think that they understand that I think there's at least enough push from some people. And now there's still some issues on the board and some other things that I've been told about, but there's enough people that have said that we're going to make this move. We're going to make this commitment because it's a smart investment. If you win here, you're going to get back a whole lot. And I think there's people finally smart enough to understand that that's where they need to be. And boy,
and I'll say this.
I've been in a long time about an offseason.
From a financial standpoint, I think they were put in a tough spot. Because they were put in a tough spot wanting to remain independent. There are certain decisions financially you have to make if you're going to remain independent in sports, especially football, with the connection for the other sports, the ACC or hockey to the Big Ten. If you're going to get this type of TV deal, I talked about it a year ago. I said, dude, they have to do a better job with their intellectual properties. They have to. They have to create more than just post-game press conferences and interviews with players. That has to be more to draw people in, to make your brand attractive, to say, yo, NBC, this is what we're worth. So now all of a sudden you hear about, R&D right now for a Hard Knock show. I'm sure you had to present plans for what you're going to do with indie media in the future to get NBC. And I'm sure, Pete Vivacqua probably was a big part of that coming from NBC. He probably helped out with the negotiations. But, they had the Big Ten. almost as leverage to say, okay, if this Notre Dame thing doesn't go well, at least we have the Big Ten in our back pocket. We can always put a Big Ten game on in prime time. Notre Dame had to step up in a lot of different ways. And they have, like the Wake Up the Echoes show, the Hard Knock type show that's coming. You know, I said something on the show on LL. I said, yo, I would love to see Notre Dame players mic'd up on the field. I know get them on the sideline, but heck, mic up, you know, a charismatic player on the field. Take that step. That is like extending your brand. That is bringing in more content, right? I said I wouldn't mind miking up the somebody on the opposing team. I wouldn't. Like, get the banter back and forth. It makes for great drama.
Right.
It gives you something else to put out there. I was like, wouldn't you have loved to hear Sam Hartman in the huddle making the call before his fourth down run when they put out the edit?
Yeah, I mean, think about going back to when Manti was playing in 2012. Wouldn't have been?
Absolutely. The Oklahoma game with the interception to seal it, all of that type of stuff. If you had those are moments. Those are moments.
Right.
And moving into the future, you know, that is, I think the NFL mic'd up for the Super Bowl the first night, which was Wednesday, was like the second biggest HBO viewing. It was some crazy numbers, right? Because we've gone from terrestrial radio where people are just sitting in their cars or sitting at home listening to sports shows. Now everything is about streaming, podcasting, getting people to come out to your app or to your YouTube page. And like, what can you put out in 2 to 3 minutes, right? Because the attention span in society now is not even that long. That is what Notre Dame seems to be going towards, even from a media standpoint, to kind of line up with what they're doing, investing on the football side with facilities and everything. And the coaches you just talked about, it seems like for once, they're moving forward all together in every area, right? Because we know this, something else. Look, we know the obstacles of getting kids in at Notre Dame. We know this. We know that Notre Dame in a way has actually been, you know, accommodating with certain recruits over the years to say, okay.
That's always been true during tenures of failed coaches and successful coaches.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's not, I mean, but if you go look at the GPAs of most classes at Notre Dame, it's going to be over 3.0. I mean, it's
Sean,
not like
last year. I actually did this last year. This is when Keon and Peyton Bowen were still committed in the class.
Mm-hmm.
And the slowest GPA of any kid that was committed to Notre Dame last year. Now, Brandon Hillman would have been a little bit lower when he committed, but that's a different animal. He wasn't committed yet. The lowest GPA was 3.25. You had multiple 5-star kids committed, because this is the thing I always said. Yes, it's harder at Notre Dame, but it's not as hard as they made it out to be. That was the frustrating thing. Why is it harder? Somebody asked in the chat. It's harder because there are kids you just can't recruit.
You can't recruit.
Kids at Notre Dame just can't recruit that Bama, Ohio State, and Georgia can recruit, no problem. Sometimes it's academic. Sometimes it's a kid wants something that you're not willing to promise. Right? That's just always, I don't care how good Notre Dame was when, let's just say Notre Dame had won 3 straight national championships when Eric Dickerson was coming out of high school. And we're getting Eric Dickerson.
No.
It just wasn't happening. Right? They weren't getting Marcus Dupree. I don't, you know, it didn't matter. You know what I mean? So there were always those type of players. What was the name of the offensive lineman that ended up getting them in the most trouble, SMU in the most trouble? Is Sean Stockridge or whatever it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was like a #1 offensive tackle from Pennsylvania, right up Notre Dame's alley. He was not going to come to Notre Dame. Why? He wanted money. That's always been true. It's been true for decades. But it's also the fact that Notre Dame kids have to go to class. Notre Dame kids have to be part of the normal student. I mean, but to me, this is what I've always said. I get sick and tired of those being used as the excuses as the way that they were, because Lou Holtz and other coaches use them as a thing to say, this is going to make us better. This is going to make us tougher. It's all about how you utilize it. And so we're not seeing those. I have not one time in the 2 years of Sean, and you know the people that I talk to at Notre Dame. You know how close they are to Marcus Freeman and how well these people know. Not one time have I ever heard anyone complain about, you know, man, we just, you know, we can't get this kid in because of the dorm thing or because of the weather, because of this. There was one academic issue that was a misunderstanding about a player that had to take time away from school to help a parent move out of the country. And they had worked out a deal with the high school to get his grades up, but somebody submitted his grades before the makeup work had been finalized, and then that caused an issue with Notre Dame. That's it. And that was more of an issue on the high school end than it was the Notre Dame end. That's the only academic issue that anyone's ever complained about. Now, there's kids that they've said, hey, we can't recruit this kid. He doesn't have the academics. But it's those are lower kids. The school has worked with these kids. But the other part of it is why I've always hated this is because of the constant misconception that if you look at top 100 football players, only 5 or 10 of them have the grades to get in Notre Dame for what Notre Dame's athletic standards are. And this, well, I remember one time, we can only get 40 guys. Okay, well, still, if you can only get 40 of the top 100 players, okay, well, let's say you only get 10, 20% of those. That's 8 top 100 players. You don't need 40 top 100 players. You can't even sign 40 players. So if you can only get 40 of them, okay, fine. Then do a better job of landing the guys of that 40. And that's where they were lacking all those years. They weren't even willing to fight for those guys. So this notion that, Southern kids or this kid or that kid or whatever don't want to come to Notre Dame because of why? Well, academics. No, it's because your football team stinks and they want to play for championships. That's why. If Taj Boyd and Deshaun Watson don't do what they do at Clemson, does anyone think that Trevor Lawrence goes to Clemson? No. If they were still the same program they were under Tommy Bowden, Trevor Lawrence doesn't go to Clemson. He probably goes to Georgia or Florida State or something like that. Like that's the reality of it. They made themselves an attractive program to where then they could go get those kind of guys. And that's what it boils down to. And that's why I would say, yes, it's harder, but I'm so tired of this notion that, Notre Dame has to get these. Like I had a Notre Dame coach once a couple of years ago, and Sean, I called you right afterward. I was so pissed off. So coach had been let go, and he says, he's like, I can't go recruit top players. Most of the kids in my room are part nerd. And I was so pissed off because I'm like, dude, you got a bunch of 4.3s and 4.4s in your room. I don't want to hear crap from you about your kids are not top players because they're part nerd. You know what? I've met some part nerds at Notre Dame that are freaking studs on the football field. You know what I mean? And I just was like, this is the problem. You're the problem, right? This isn't a them problem. This is a you problem. This is you blaming everybody else for why you've sucked as a football coach. You know what I mean? And so you don't have that with this staff. At least I haven't heard it in 2 years. Yeah. I haven't heard it in 2 years. And that's the thing is like, Marcus Freeman has this no excuses mentality. No, I don't want to hear any bullcrap excuses.
Exactly.
Right? This is the reality of who we are at Notre Dame. That
but
means we're going to get a different kind of kid, but let's turn that into a plus.
Yeah. It's not, look, in life, regardless of how you want to say it, there are people never arrive at the same destination. Some people, if I'm driving down to Atlanta and somebody else is driving from DC to Atlanta, they might have to drive through a storm. It might be clear skies and we're going to the same destination. It's more difficult. All that matters is I got there. No excuses, right? Like, oh man, I couldn't make it. I stopped and turned around because it was raining. No, you're going to encounter at Notre Dame, you're going to encounter a little more turbulence than other top programs. But you can't stop midway like the predecessor and pretty much just give up because it's a little bit more difficult.
Right.
You can't.
It takes away from my golf game.
It can't.
That's what
you
it comes
can't.
down to.
And people that feel like, like you said, it becomes it's a fact. Certain things are a fact about being a head coach in Notre Dame. It's a fact. Your actions turn it into excuses as a head coach. That's the difference.
It is harder to win at USC than a lot of people think
because
of all the distractions.
Mm-hmm.
Pete Carroll stopped using his excuse and said, We're going to lean into this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he won multiple titles, right? Now, it's become an issue for every coach since him because you didn't hire the right people. And at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to, Sean, is, you got to make the right hires. Let's wrap this part up, Sean, with this part of the conversation of, okay, that's fine. Sentiment is great. Sentiment doesn't win you championships. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't win you battles. I think of the scene in the first Avengers, right? Where Thor's battling Loki and he tricks him into, he tricks him into kind of, Angela did a good job of coming in here and not getting into the room, but you see Rita didn't care as much. But he kind of lulls him into this sense of, hey, we can do this, and then he pulls the thing out and stabs him and goes like, sentiment. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, sentiment doesn't win.
No,
it's cool for the rah-rah, but sentiment doesn't win. These moves have to mean something. They have to say, okay, yeah, you spent money, but we saw them spend a lot of money on Brian Van Gorder, and that was a terrible hire. We saw Notre Dame spend money on John Tenuta, and that was a bad hire, right? Let's look at it to wrap up from a football standpoint. Did Notre Dame get better this offseason from a football standpoint? And that's the thing, the final piece for me. I like Jared Parker. I was higher on Jared Parker's potential than most, but there's no debating on Jared Parker 2024 versus Mike Denbrock in 2024. And even if you take out Mike Denbrock's last year at LSU, which is a bit of an anomaly, 45 points a game. And, that was an insanely good year. I don't see him repeating that at Notre Dame. That just was that perfect storm year where I actually think the bad defense helped the offense put up better numbers, but made them a worse team. So take that out. You're still talking about a coach that has done an outstanding job at a lot of places. Cincinnati did a great job. They were 37 plus points a game, the two-year stretch that they were really, really good in 2020, 2021. He took an LSU offense that was 26 points a game, jumped them up to almost 35 points a game in 1 year. Forget the jump to 45 this year. And so the track record is there. That's an upgrade. It's a recruiting upgrade, in my opinion. Mike Brown is a significant upgrade over the job we saw from Chancey Stuckey this past year. Recruiting-wise, we'll see. That's a little bit of a TBD. But the coaching part, to me, is certainly better. So offensively, you're better. Plus, you're going into year 2 of Gino Guidugli, year 2 of Joe Rudolph, and year 3 of Dylan McCullough. Those are upgrades just from an experience alone standpoint. It's upgrades across the board on offense. Defensively, we're going to have to find out, what they do without Chris O'Leary. The one thing we knew Chris O'Leary could do was coach. But getting Al Golden back, getting Mike Mickens back, getting Al Washington back, and allowing Mike – because Max Bulla couldn't have come back next year if he wasn't promoted to a full-time coach. Not as an on-field guy. He could have maybe got hired as an analyst. But I promise you there were other Power 5 schools looking at Max Bulla as a position coach, the job he did this year. And so now you keep him. And so when I look at it, Sean, and then, year 2 of Marty Biaggi, and then you're getting into a situation too where Lauren Lando doesn't have to replace Matt Bayless. He's replacing Fred Hale. So the strength coach situation to me is improved. No disrespect to Fred Hale, but he just doesn't have the long history and track record. He was also thrust into a really tough spot. Fred Hale was. And so it's an upgrade, because if Marcus Freeman didn't think it was an upgrade, he just would have promoted Fred Hale. And again, this is no disrespect to Fred Hale. He did the best job he could in a really tough spot, and so to me, you look all around, the staff is upgraded. And on defense, it's at least experientially upgraded, right? More years in the system. On offense, it's experientially upgraded, but also talent upgraded from a coaching standpoint. And so I would argue that the combination of talent and experience, this is arguably the best Notre Dame coaching staff we've seen across the board in over 20 years, at least. I think you could argue maybe even a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, Kelly had a good 2 or 3 2-year staff.
On one side of the ball.
On one side of the ball, yeah.
I mean, the offensive staff in 2015, legit. Well, actually, I think the even better year, 2014 offensive staff was phenomenal. Offensively, you had Tony Alford at running backs. You had Matt LaFleur as your quarterbacks coach. You had Mike Denbrock as your receivers coach. You had Scott Booker, tight ends coach, and Harry Heaston as your line. That was an awesome offensive staff. Problem was your defensive staff was led by Brian Van Gorder. That's the problem. I think you've seen years where the defensive staff was pretty good. The 2011 defensive staff was pretty good. Bob Diaco, you had the late coach who passed away. I'm trying to remember his name. Bob Elliott. You had Chuck Martin was still part of the defensive staff then. You had Kerry Cooks. So you had some pretty good defensive staffs, but you never had both of them. That's my thing, Sean. I think Charlie had a couple pretty decent offensive staffs. For the first couple were okay. They weren't great, but they were good. But the defensive staffs were problems. I think you got to go back. I mean, you got to go back a long time, in my opinion.
Yeah, you probably have to go back to Lou. You probably have to go to the 90s. I agree. Yeah.
So that's something to get you excited about. So you've made a commitment.
You have to be excited. Yeah.
Commitment should pay off, Sean. I think they committed money and they brought in coaches that have the track records you want and you look for.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Will it work? You'll find out.
I think it makes Marcus Freeman a considerably much better head coach. You're investing in him. You're investing in him as a head coach. When Marcus Freeman, as a head coach, has to put out fires over here and over there, has to juggle with the administration, right? And how things are set up at Notre Dame. And then he's learning how to be a head coach on the fly at Notre Dame. That's very difficult, man. That's very difficult as a first-time head coach. And when you talk about that and the way he handled everything, and I think what allowed him to handle everything was his mindset. We're not going to have any excuses. We're going to question anything. We're not going to wait for things to happen. When we see things that need to be changed, we're going to go and make the necessary changes immediately. That is two words: accountability and responsibility. Marcus Freeman is never looking for anybody to blame. It's on me. It's on me. 10 men on the field against Ohio State, that's on me. That's on me. My team wasn't ready against Louisville, that's on me. That's on me.
Truly on me, Sean, because Brian Kelly just said, this is on me. My D-line coach should have done that. Yes. That's on me. That's on me. Sam Mustipher should have snapped better against NC State in a hurricane, but that's on me. Right? So there was always even when he would take blame, it was always after he had thrown someone else under the bus, and it was this half-hearted, oh, it's on me that my offensive coordinator sucked. But he was blaming his offensive coordinator, to your point. And when things weren't good enough, Marcus Freeman made changes. Right? And so that's an important thing. So the talent acquisition has improved tremendously. We've already talked about that. But you feel like the coaching has gotten better. Now we've got to see it all put together. That's still a wait and see. Still got a show me mode, right? They're still in show me mode. But you start feeling like the floor, I'll say this, the floor has been raised this year, in my opinion, from a coaching standpoint. And I think there's a final thing too, Sean. You mentioned this, that it makes Marcus Freeman better. There's another way that it makes Marcus Freeman better. It's a lot easier to be successful as a coach when you don't have as many agendas in the rooms from an assistant standpoint. And when it's there's so many parallels between football and warfare that are appropriate parallels. I may be the overall general, but anyone that studied the Civil War will know the North always had the superior military numbers and weapons, but they had inferior generals. It wasn't necessarily the main general, because sometimes the main generals say, go do this, and then the other generals wouldn't go carry it out. Where with the Southern side, when Robert E. Lee said, go do this, go take that hill, they were bought in, they went and took that hill. Where, even early on, if Ulysses says, Grant, hey, we need you to do this, and then the general on the field would cower or not do it or or whatever, right? Same with football. Like if you're telling, hey, go out and do this, but guys aren't bought in, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I should be the general. You know what I mean? Then guess what? You're not going to be successful because players see that stuff. But when you say, hey, this is what we're doing, go do it, and every coach is bought into that, and the chances of that are so much greater now with the people he's brought in. Because even if Mike Denbrock didn't know Marcus Freeman, he's always been a bought-in assistant coach. He's always been I got the head coach's back assistant. He was like that with Ty. He was like that with Kelly. Like, he's always been that kind of guy. But now that he was like that with Luke Fickell. But now, Sean, he's in a situation where he also knows the head coach. Mike Brown knows the head coach. Mike Brown left a guy. Actually, let me look this up, Sean, because I want to see how many years Mike Brown had been with Luke Fickell, because that's something to think about too. Is Mike Brown? Of course, I got to make sure I type in football coach, because otherwise I keep going to the basketball coach. Mike Brown was with Luke Fickell for 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. 5 years he had been with Luke Fickell at 2 different schools. Left Luke Fickell, who had made him the assistant head coach, to come to Notre Dame with Marcus Freeman. I can promise you that was not just about money. He believes in what they're trying to build here. And that's what has me excited about it. So to me, Sean, you got better on the field. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing. You got better on the field. And now you learn from your mistakes. Marcus Freeman's Mike Denbrock's going to bring over a decade's worth of being at Notre Dame to the table to say, hey, here's some potential pitfalls we fell into after successful seasons when I was here the last 2 times, because Mike Denbrock was part of that 2002 team that started off great. He was part of the 2012 team, the 2015 team. He's been a part of some of those teams that have, fallen off. What did we do wrong? He'll be able to learn from that. And so I just think I just look around, Sean, and just from a coaching standpoint, there's no debate that this is a much better coaching staff than what it was a year ago. Because, again, it's not just about the new guys. It's about Joe Rudolph will be better in year 2 than year 1. There's nothing in his track record that makes me think. Now, we don't know how good he'll be, but there's no debate he'll be better than he was last year. There's going to be no debate that Al Washington's going to be a year better, and Mike Mickens is going to be a year better, and Max Bulla is going to be a year better, just because it's more time here. Mike Mickens probably the one I'd take out of that equation because I sometimes forget he's been here since 2020. But like Al Washington, year 3, Max Bulla, year 2, Dylan McCullough, year 3, Joe Rudolph, year 2, Gino Guidugli, year 2, Marty Biaggi, year 2. And that experience, the track record at Notre Dame of coaches going into years 2 and 3 has usually been better than years 1. And there's always anomalies, but that's been the track record. Then you add the new guys. I'm excited about it, Sean. There's no doubt. I think Notre Dame has done that, and we'll dive into just how much we believe in this in part 3 of the show. But we're going to get to part 3 here in a little bit. We still got to get to part 2, Sean, and we're going to get to that next. We're going to talk a little bit of recruiting. Before we do, folks, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. Not just share it with the Google on Google, which will obviously help us with the algorithm, but also share it with your Notre Dame friends and family who are not listening to the show. Definitely do that. And if you have not done so, go to the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Check out the things we're doing there. Very lively discussion going on right now, started by our guy Andrew Gilmore about the Notre Dame schedule in 2024 that you guys can dive into as part of that conversation as well. So we'll get into that. All that stuff is going to be discussed on the board, but we're going to get into recruiting next. And I'm excited to talk about that. But also a reminder, we will have a mailbag at the end. It won't be a long one, but some questions that we like. Super chats, obviously, we'll answer, but there will be some other questions that we'll get into as well. So, Sean, let's get into part 2 of the RTCF show. So we flipped the T and the R in today's show. And part 2 is the recruiting aspect. And we're going to talk about Notre Dame's already got 14 kids committed. I could see them going from anywhere from 25 to 28 in this class. So, but even with that they're a high number at 14. They're still either halfway done or barely over halfway done. So there's still a lot to add to the board. Current number one class in 247 and rivals. Will it stay there? I have my doubts just because I know of some of the biases that are built into some of the rankings, especially at 247. But to me, this class has a chance to stay a lot higher than past classes, but it's about how you finish. And so we're going to talk a little bit, Sean, about the recruits that we view as the must-gets on offense and then defense for this class. And when we define must-gets, it's not so much about finishing top 5 because I don't care. People say you can't win a championship unless you recruit top 5 every year. Well, Michigan was an exception. Clemson was also an exception. They never had a top 5. The only top 5 class Dabo ever had was the year after, a year or two after his second title. Clemson's title teams. Notre Dame had higher rated recruiting classes in 4 of the 5 years leading into their 2015 matchup. And the only class Clemson was higher was the freshman class. That was it. Notre Dame had more players drafted from the 2015 team, guys who played in the first 3 rounds than Clemson did after that 2015 team. So it's about recruiting impact players, not so much recruiting rankings, impact players. And to me, when we talk about must-gets, that's where it's got to be. Got to be impact players, needle movers, gap closers, all those type of things. But there's also must-gets are also because there's some guys on the board, Sean, that are guys that you send a statement. You make a statement if you land those guys. And make a statement isn't just towards other recruits. It's also towards college football. And there's some statement guys on the board now, Sean, to me, that if Notre Dame can land them, they're not only adding impact players, but they're letting the rest of college football know, recruits and players, that this place is serious. They're not messing around anymore. And will tell us that Notre Dame is here to stay as a recruiting power in the NIL era. And so let's dive into that, Sean. I'm going to kick it off with a bit of a different one because my number one must-get, they already got. Now it's just about holding on to them because schools are not giving up on this kid, and that's Deuce Knight. Now, I have no concerns about Deuce leaving right now. There's been no evidence. There's been nothing other than, people writing clickbait stuff about it. Will he leave? Right as of right now, I can only take Deuce at his word and then follow his actions. And his actions are that of a kid that's fully bought into Notre Dame. But that's got to remain true through signing day. To me, he's kind of that needle mover because you get – I like Kenny Minchie a lot. CJ Carr and Deuce Knight are different than Kenny Minchie. I think Kenny Minchie's an incredible talent. I think Kenny Minchie's a guy you can win a title with, but Kenny Minchie wasn't a pickup that sent shockwaves through college football. That was holy moly. You got for 2 reasons. Number one, he wasn't that highly ranked. Number 2, they got him really late. That was the other reason. So this isn't about Kenny's not as talented as these 2 guys. It's just the circumstance of getting them is different. You got Kenny in November, a month before signing day. There was going to be no impact that Kenny was going to be making in a recruiting class. CJ and Deuce are different. We saw the impact CJ had on last year's class. Now, CJ did it differently than Deuce, but it was impactful. Last year's offensive class is one of the best Notre Dame's landed in a long time, and CJ was a big part of that. Deuce we've yet to see the payoff on the offensive side of the ball for a couple reasons, but we're actually seeing Deuce be very impactful on defense. We've seen defensive. Chris Burgess talked about the impact of Deuce Knight on him committing to Notre Dame. And other kids that we think they're going to get are that way. So he's number one. You got to keep him in the class. I have no reason to think that he won't be. I know there's a panic right now. Hold on. Why are you bringing up Deuce? Are you worried? I'm not worried about him leaving right now. I'm simply saying if we're going to talk about must-gets, you have to at least kick it off with the most must-get that was on the board that they've already got. And that's where I'm coming from. And that's what Deuce is. And so you got to start there for me, Sean.
Yo, and you feel good, right? Because you knew this was coming. You knew schools were going to come after him and keep pressuring. You knew Ole Miss, Mississippi State, the schools in the South close to him, Tennessee, would continue to make a push. And even in that, the young man plans to come to 2 spring practices. He's already said it. I'm coming to 2 spring practices. I'm locked in. And you know what the landmine is, right? If Notre Dame makes it to the fall with Deuce Knight, it's pretty much As long as he's not taking official visits in the summertime, once you get to the fall, Deuce Knight is going to be locked in and still be trying to get guys to. I mean, he's still trying to go after guys that most people say, "Oh, well, Notre Dame might not have a good shot at getting that kid." You can't tell him that. Like, he is selling, he is bought in, and he is selling. They choose harder. Choose harder.
The family's bought in.
Absolutely.
That's the big thing that you have to think about relative to some other top guys that they lost. Because like with Peyton Bowen, mom was bought in, dad was not. With Keon Keeley, once mom stopped being bought in, it was over. I mean, we've seen this. Parents have to be bought in. And when you hear what we hear about Deuce's mom and other family, dad and other family members, like there's a buy-in. I mean, Deuce even joked before he committed, if it was up to my mom, I would have committed months ago. You know what I mean?
Well, he said Notre Dame recruited his parents better than any other program.
Which is smart.
He said, dude, they did a great job recruiting my parents. So he is definitely the number one in the class. Forget just offense side of the ball. He is the number one must get in the 25 class.
Here's another one for me on offense, Sean. Taylon Taylor. Here's why Taylon Taylor matters for me. It's a trifecta. Number one, he's a big-time talent to me. Big-time talent that fits really well into Mike Denbrock's system. Number one. Number two, he's in your backyard. You've got to, we've said this. If Notre Dame wants a kid from Illinois, they got to get kids from Illinois. Number three, right now, I believe Georgia's his leader. I think Georgia right now is the school that most programs recruiting Taylon believe is the school to beat. So to me, that's part three is you've got to beat what many people consider the preeminent program in college football right now, Georgia, because Bama's not considered that anymore. Now, they may still be, but Kalen DeBoer's got to prove it all over again, right? Georgia's considered the preeminent program. They're at the point now with Kirby, they can go anywhere the heck they want and get players. They're going out to California to get kids. They go to Texas to get kids. They go up to Jersey to get kids. They go to Illinois to get kids. They're going to go wherever the heck they want now because they're Georgia. And they've won 2 championships and sent how many kids into the first round of the NFL draft. So to me, Taylon's important, Sean, because of those three things. Big-time player. You got to put that fence around Illinois, and this is a chance to beat Georgia. You've started to beat Ohio State a little bit for some kids. Now you've got a chance to beat Georgia, and that's not a program you've really shown the ability to beat for anyone other than offensive linemen in recent years.
And that's a kid. You have to read the tea leaves. Yes, a lot of people feel Georgia has to lead. It's a kid, local kid that's been into the campus multiple times. You got him to come down and meet the new wide receiver coach because a lot of people thought the change was Chancey Stuckey, Mike Brown might cause Notre Dame to take a step back. The kid drove through a storm, just like Owen Strebe. They drove through the same storm to get to junior day to rebuild their relationship, and Mike Brown had been recruiting them at Wisconsin anyway. So the relationship is there. So now this is the situation that's going to be one of those different type of recruitments. And what I mean by that, the strategy for Notre Dame has been to jump out early in recruiting. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to jump out early. We're going to get 50% of the class done and then go from there. This is a kid that you're going to have to fight to the end, man. You're going to have to fight to the end and don't give up. Don't give up because it might look like Georgia at this point. Over the summer, it might switch to Ohio State and might switch to a Miami. Stay in the fight because what you have on your side is relationship. What you have on your side is his mother loves the university. What you have on the side is proximity. Play to that. Play to that. Continue to build and continue to fight. And then, more than anything, go out there this year and offensively rip it up.
Yes.
Rip it up. Let Chris Mitchell have a great season. Let Jordan Faison still take a step forward. Let Jaden Greathouse. That is going to be, because that really, honestly, is probably the missing piece for that young
Sean,
man.
Take probably out.
Yeah.
Everything you just mentioned is everything but that. If you were a top receiver right now, there's no reason that you'd go to Notre Dame for football reasons. Jaden Greathouse will not pick Notre Dame for football reasons. right? If it was only about football, there's other schools Jaden would have looked at. When Texas started calling, Jaden would have been like, yes, please take me, right? Jaden was one of those kids who had he had a mindset, but also family did, that was like, yes, football matters, but there's more to it than that. And so, yes, it's football. It's 100% football. I mean, I'm watching this school. Look what they did with Lad McConkey. Now, here's the interesting thing. Did you see the news today? Did you see the coaching news today that happened in college football? The receivers coach at Georgia is going to take an NFL job with the Buccaneers. If you're Notre Dame, you got to swoop in and be like, this is our chance to make that move. You got to. You have to. That's huge, huge for Notre Dame. But it's still Georgia. It's still Kirby Smart. It's still, hey, yeah, we didn't hire him that long ago, right? We'll replace him with somebody just as good. That's what Georgia's mantra is going to be. But when you're Notre Dame, you got to take advantage of that, Sean. Here's kid number 2, and this is going to sound. Some people are going to be like, scratch their head on this one, because in number 3 for me, and I only have 3 on offense, so I'll let you give yours after this one, Sean. Derek Meadows. Now, here's why I say with Derek Meadows is a little bit of an interesting one, because I don't think Derek Meadows is an impact player right now. I don't. He had 15 catches last year, and he was healthy. He's an incredibly raw player. He's not a difference maker right now. He's not a guy that you look at and say, this kid comes into your program and he dominates and he's this and he's that. He's not that guy right now. He has the potential to be that guy. But here's the thing for me, that why I think Derek Meadows is one of the must-gets for me on offense. Number 1, the upside is enormous. It really is. He may never pan out. He's a very boomer bust kind of kid, very much so. But he's the kind of kid you take a chance on, number 1. Number 2, he's a guy to me that when you look at where they are from a recruiting standpoint, before it was you had to beat Washington to get Derek Meadows. Now to get Derek Meadows, you've got to beat Bama. You've got to beat like Georgia. You got to get all these schools that have now jumped into the mix. I'm actually going to pull his profile up now, Sean, and because like the offer list for him in recent, since he had a really good camp, rivals camp, he's gotten offers from Tennessee, LSU, Alabama. So let's see, I'm going backwards. LSU, Michigan, Bama, Florida, Georgia have all offered in the last 2 weeks. So it's a different game now. So even though I have my questions about Derek from a boomer bust standpoint, the 2 things you can't deny is if he booms, he's going to be a faster version of Equanimeous St. Brown. If he booms. And you take a chance on a 6'6" kid that can run and jump. You just do. And if you believe in Mike Brown the way that you believe in Mike Brown, then you got to say, if I give him this freaking ball of clay, what's he going to do with it? But it's a signal. We went out west and we beat Georgia, we beat Bama, we beat LSU, we beat Michigan, we beat everybody to get this kid who's one of the hottest receiver recruits in the country right now. It's a statement win as well. So you land a kid with an incredibly high ceiling, and he's got a skill set you don't have a lot of on your roster too, Sean. And you have to beat some big-time teams to get him. So I think a lot of Notre Dame fans think Derek Meadows is basically just a matter of time before he joins the class. That is not true. Notre Dame is going to have to recruit hard to get him. He was 50-50 with Notre Dame and Washington, and I felt Washington had the lead when Kalen DeBoer and Jamarcus Shepard were still at Washington. So he's another one, Sean, that when you look at what you said earlier, you're going to have to go prove it on the field this year. Because even if he does commit to Notre Dame this summer, if the offense doesn't look any different, he's going to be a lot more receptive to some of those other schools. When Kalen DeBoer goes out there and they throw for about 4,000 yards at Bama this year and they still win 10 games and they're still a pretty good football team, all of a sudden that becomes a lot more attractive. And so to me, he's my third must get, because I thought Owen Strebig was one, Sean, but he's kind of already in the class.
Yeah.
I thought James Flanagan was one. He's already in the class. But of the guys that are uncommitted, to me, it's Taylon Taylor and it's Derek Meadows. Those are really the top of my board guys for the must-gets on offense. Anybody that you would – any thoughts on Derek Meadows, number 1, Sean, on that being on that list? And then number 2, is there any other offensive players that you had on your list that you think are must-gets?
No, because offensively, they are really close to almost being done other than the wide receiver position, honestly.
And there are no muskets at running back. There weren't. I mean, it's just not a great running back year now.
No,
it's really not.
No. So those were the three obvious, in my opinion. And Derek Meadows, like you talked about, he's raw. You haven't yet seen the production. But, Bishop Gorman is almost like one of those schools where kids pop either late junior or in their senior seasons, because it is a wait your turn program at wide receiver. It really is. So, I think even Z Branch popped his junior year, middle of his junior year, and then had an incredible senior year before going to USC. So
he committed early summer, I believe.
Yeah. So Derek Meadows, I think, with his talent and just seeing what he's doing on the circuit, Derek Meadows is going to have a really good season. The production is going to be there.
Bishop, and even if he doesn't, I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still 6'6" and fast.
That works on any level. Big and fast usually wins.
Well, and they're in a place, Sean, too, where in past years I'd be a little bit more hesitant to look at a guy like Derek Meadows, because you were such a thin, your margin for error at receiver was so thin that you couldn't afford to take a chance on a guy who may bust. But they've recruited the position so well, and they've proven they go out and get good portal guys. Like up until now, the best portal guy you'd gotten was Caleb Smith. It was just like okay guy.
Yeah.
When you show that you can go get Bo Collins, you showed you can go get guys like Chris Mitchell, and then moving forward, you're gonna have such a better reputation because you do have guys like CJ Carr, you do have guys like Deuce Knight, you do have guys like Kenny Minchie. There's a belief that, hey, the quarterback situation is going to be pretty good in Notre Dame moving forward.
Yeah,
and even if you don't go to the portal. So I think that's going to make Notre Dame a much more. And if the offense is as good as we think it's going to be this year, I think at least one of the transfer guys is going to have a really good season. You become a much more attractive destination in that regard. But they've recruited well enough, in my opinion, that you absolutely take a kid like Derek Meadows. My only pushback with Notre Dame fans has been, stop thinking this kid is something that he's not. That he's this 5-star, no doubt about it kind of kid. He's not. He has the potential to be.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, your potential means a whole lot more than your rankings or your floor or whatever else. And so that's why. And by the way, Ben Skoranek was not a great portal get for two reasons. Number one, the portal wasn't a thing then. And number two, he was not a great player. He was a good addition. He was not great. He was a 7th-round draft pick who, was a good player. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but let's be careful using that word great too loosely for a guy that caught 29 passes that season. So, yes, you hope if Bo Collins catches 29 passes this year, we won't be like, great portal addition, right? It'll be good pickup. So anyway, that's mine. Sean, defensively, you want to kick it off with defense and just kind of go with who your top guy is? Because I kind of have an order to mine that's a little bit interesting, Sean, but I wanted to get your thoughts.
I had to choose between
bigger list here for me, by the way.
4 to 5 guys. I had like 5 guys in consideration. I'm going to start out with Damian Shanklin.
Yeah.
He's a must get. And the offers are starting to come now. I think he was at the Nike One event this past weekend. The teams are falling in love with him. Offers will be coming. Tennessee is one of the teams reported that's really coming after him hard. And he's probably going to go ahead and get an unofficial visit in the spring to Tennessee, along with coming to Notre Dame. And if I'm not mistaken, he's already said he's coming back in the summer as well.
To Notre Dame? He said an official visit to Notre Dame.
Yeah, he said an official visit. So
Ohio State's going to be a team to watch there too, Sean.
But it's been Notre Dame, Ohio State for a while.
They haven't offered yet.
They haven't offered yet, but
right. We think they're going to. Yeah,
we think they're going to. So he's a must get. Indiana kid. You get the best kids from the best, inner city with Ben Davis and all the powers they have up there in Indianapolis. You have to get kids from Warren Central, Ben Davis, the best schools in the state.
Yeah,
they've had success in Fort Wayne. With Drew Tranquil, Jalen Smith, players like that. I think even Tyler Eifert, if I'm not mistaken, is from Fort Wayne. So control your state.
Yeah.
It's not just about Chicago, but control your state and get the best players out of your state. That's important because Indiana is not really the most fertile ground for
Yeah.
high school football.
Indiana does a really good job of producing players at the top. They
Mhm.
don't produce the depth. And to me, you've done really well out of Fort Wayne at time. You've got obviously Tyler Eifert from there. You got Drew Tranquil from there. Got
Mhm.
Jalen Smith from there. He was pretty good. Indianapolis has been more hit or miss. You got the Martin brothers, you got Sheldon Day, but you've had a lot of misses in Indianapolis.
Mhm.
And that's an area where Ohio State has done very well in Indianapolis. And it's your state. I don't care where it is. It's if it ends in .in on your mailing address, that's an in-state program Notre Dame's got to get. So Damian Shanklin, Sean, too, you need Viper depth. You need another year of good Viper depth. He's an impact player, in my opinion. He's not quite, he's not quite 5-star right now, but I definitely see a 5-star. I love the ceiling for that kid. But to your point, Tennessee's not that far away from Indianapolis. It's not like going down to Miami. Columbus is not. I mean, Indianapolis. I'd actually want to look that up, Sean. But Indianapolis to Columbus is not that far of a drive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually going to look that up right now, Sean, and see how far of a drive that is, because it's not that it's 2.5 hour drive, which means Indianapolis to Columbus is about the same distance as Indianapolis to South Bend. It's about a 5 to 10 minute difference, depending on how much traffic you catch. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, yeah, you say in state, but Columbus it's not like with other kids. It's like, you don't want to leave your parents in Indianapolis and go play at Georgia. You want to see your parents get them play. Hey, bro, my parents are going to watch me play, wherever I go, if it's between those two schools.
Right. You're right.
So this is a must win. And it also optically, if Ohio State or Tennessee jumps in late and beats you for an in-state kid, that's a bad look.
Yeah.
And with Al Washington, he did a really good job last year, off to a pretty solid start this year. This is the one that kind of solidifies dude has arrived and he knows what he's doing at Notre Dame. Or, okay, he's won some, he's lost some, but there's room to be desired. This is a big recruitment for Al Washington as well. You won one of them in Chris Burgess, but to truly be that dude, you got to win both. You got to win Shanklin and you got to win Burgess.
Yeah.
And so that's a big one for me. I kind of lump him and Mark Zachary together, Sean, for the reason that you mentioned. Both Indy kids, because you mentioned Ben Davis during your intro on Shanklin. Well, where's Mark Zachary go? Ben Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a kid. He's another one. You have to beat national programs to get him. You have to beat Michigan. You have to beat Ohio State. It's not just, yes, they're regional teams, but they're also big-time powers. And that's the thing is like, look, if you want to become the best team in the Midwest, you got to be winning these battles against those teams. And this is a recruitment that in the past, Notre Dame has not won a lot. Mark Zachary also just got an offer from Bama. So his offer, I think he got one from Florida recently as well.
Mm-hmm.
So his offer list is blowing up. Other schools are trying to get into the mix. You've been in a good position with him for a while. You've got to close. That's a big one too. So I put him and Mark Zachary and Damian Shanklin are both on my list, Sean, as that keeping him in
that
state.
Combination from Indianapolis in this season. Yeah. And you start to build a pipeline.
Bingo.
That's what you start to do.
And if they come to Notre Dame and actually have success, and the Notre Dame staff is very high on both players, now all of a sudden you become that team that kids want to play for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's another one from here's my one. Here's what my number one. Those guys were kind of 2 and 3 for me in state. Here's my number one at the very, very top, Dallas Golden. And Dallas Golden is that way for me for several reasons. Number one, he's an elite player. I have him as a top 50 recruit with 5-star upside. I think he's the kind of kid that could literally start for you at 4 different positions. I think he could start for you in 5 if you want to count nickel as a different position. He could start for you at corner, either corner spot. He could start for you at nickel. He could start for you at safety. He could start for you at receiver. He could start for you at running back. On top of that, in order to land him, you've got to beat Southern powers. I mean, you do. You've got to beat Florida State if you're going to land him. He's got an offer. He got an offer recently from Texas. He got an offer recently from USC. He got an offer recently from Oregon. this kid has got a Bama offer. This kid's got a Clemson offer. This kid has a Georgia offer. He has an LSU offer. He has an Ohio State offer. I mean, this kid you can't get a better offer list than what this kid has. And he's at a school that you've had a rough track record at too, man. You know, Nelson Aguilar, I know they had a D lineman back in the day that Notre Dame wanted from there that they didn't get. You obviously had Keon committed. He flipped. If you can win this one, you're landing an elite player. That's always number one. Always number one. You're going down into Florida and not getting a typical Florida win for Notre Dame. And what I mean typical, meaning like you got on a kid early or he wasn't getting recruited by a lot of other top schools. You're getting a second DB win in the state of Florida for an elite player that you had to beat top schools for. If you can go into Florida and steal Ivan Taylor and Dallas Golden out of that state in 1 year, that is going to scare the crap out of SEC teams. It's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Because you had to beat them. This is like when they went and got, Kyle Hamilton, that didn't shock a lot of people because Notre Dame got on him early before Georgia and those teams kind of got on him. So it's like, okay, that one makes sense. If you know Kyle's background, you understand, it made sense. This is not the kind of win Notre Dame has had nearly enough of down south. And when you can get him and Ivan Taylor in the same class and Davion Dixon, that's been the one spot that Notre Dame just has not done well in recent years.
Yeah.
And so you get a guy like Dallas Golden, Sean, you're adding an elite football player and you're beating the best teams in the South for him. And he's from the South, right? That's huge. I mean, that there is no bigger statement win, in my opinion, left on the board than him. That's why Dallas was kind of at the top of my list.
Yeah. For me, I had Shanklin, then at 2, I had the safety position. And it was between Dallas Golden and Jadon Blair. And for me, it was like,
well, right now, Dallas is being recruited to play corner.
Right
now, yeah.
Well, for me, both of those guys were like,
Sean, dive into Jadon because he's next on my list.
Yo.
So like I had it wasn't really in order, it's like just marks, but Dallas, Damian, Mark, Jadon's next for me. So let's dig into. So far,
let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. I love this film. To me, definitely easily top 100 player. Easily top 100 player, right? Dude, I'm like, I remember the first time I showed Malik his film, Malik was like, how big is this dude? He just looks so much bigger than everybody else. And why is he moving like that at that size? And it's like that, in my opinion, is the attraction to him as a player, to get that menacing size and speed on the back end in Al Golden's defense. Like I don't want to call him the next Kyle Hamilton, but it's like you get that type of backside athleticism because we've seen the safeties play really well.
Yes.
And they really haven't. Xavier Watts is probably has a chance to be back in first round if he can.
He's an elite high college football player.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. But to your point, Sean, he's different than Kyle Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
But here's one thing that they have. Could you imagine the range that Kyle Hamilton has at safety in Al Golden's defense?
Yes.
Right. So even though they're different plays, like I think Jadon can play more over the top than Kyle did. Kyle was a come downhill. That's exactly how the Ravens are using him.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, again, I'm only going off playoff football, but I don't know if it was different in the regular season. But when I watched them in the playoffs, that's all they did with Kyle was just
it was different early on.
Mm-hmm.
Because they tried to use him in coverage a lot early on. And then they found out like, yo, this is his strength. Let's just unleash him.
Yeah, and it's not that he can't do other things. It's just he's so good at playing downhill.
Yeah.
And Jadon brings more over the top, can play center field, super rangy player. And here's the crazy thing, Sean. I think right now he's a top 100 player, but here's something crazy. He's not even close to reaching his full. I don't think people realize how good this kid can be. He's got first round NFL draft pick talent, like easy.
Yeah.
Easy. And he's such a great fit because he could play all three safety, two safety and the nickel spot.
Yes.
In what would basically be sort of like a hybrid rover position.
Mhm.
Not a rover as in like he's a linebacker, but a rover in that you want to get fast on the field, but then you put like a 6'4" guy that can just blow. Try running screen game to Jadon Blair's side of the field when he's a junior in college.
Yeah.
Good luck. You know what I mean? Like, not happening.
Yeah.
Try throwing a curl route or an in cut to the field when you've got Jadon Blair jumping under the hook curl zone. Good luck with that. You know what I mean? And so it's like his talent. I mean, and that's the thing you start getting excited, Sean, is they've already got Ivan Taylor, who's a dude. They've already got Ethan Long, who's a very talented player. They've already got Cree Thomas, who I love as a player. You add Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, and Jadon Blair, which is possible. It is possible to land all three of those. There will not be a better secondary class in 2025, with all due respect to what Ohio State's doing, and they're putting together a heck of a DB class, in my opinion, Ohio State. There won't be, in my opinion, a better DB class than the one Notre Dame would put together if they can land those three kids.
Same thing you said about the coaches. We would have to go back to the 90s to find a better Notre Dame secondary.
We have to go back to when they were bringing in Bobby Taylor and Tom Carter and guys like Jeff Harris every year.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, they were bringing Lou Samoji would talk about this. They'd be bringing in these DBs that were great players. They never could see the field.
Right.
Because they were just, it was so loaded. Or they'd lose a first round pick and the next year be just as good because you lose Tom Carter and then you replace him the next year with some other dude. You know what I mean? Bobby Taylor moves from free safety to corner or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just, and you know, you lose Todd Light and you replace him with Tom Carter. You know, I mean, Notre Dame was just loaded, as good as anybody in the country at producing DBs from like 88 to like 94. And
like running back and DB was probably the hardest position at Notre Dame at that time to get on the field.
Oh, yeah. Reggie Brooks had to get moved to corner as a freshman because he was so buried on the depth chart at running back. You know,
right? And Willie Clark ended up on the defensive side of the ball. He was like, what, #1 running back in the nation?
It was nuts. That was during that stretch where Notre Dame like went, I think, 3 years in a row and landed the #1 class in the country. And that is a truly elite. And here's the thing. There's not one player in that group that's similar to another. The closest you can find is Ivan Taylor and Ethan Long, and I wouldn't even go there. You can maybe even compare Ivan in Dallas as similar players, but even then I wouldn't go there. And there's not one guy in that group that can only play one position. Not one in that group that can only play one position. And there's a couple guys, and to me at the top of my board for that is Dallas Golden, Cree Thomas, that could literally play all 5 secondary positions, in my opinion. Like, I think Cree is a very underrated player.
See, what that gives you, this is a reference to the 2012 championship game. To whereas Alabama said, yo, no, was it? Yes. Was it Minka as a freshman?
Going against Tyler Eifert?
Yes, they just put the best.
It was the corner.
Was it D. Milner?
Yeah, D. Milner.
Yeah. Like, don't worry about the wide receiver. You take him away. And that's the type of versatility you want. You know,
there's no matchup that you can't win at that point in time. Like, okay, against Ohio State, they have this really good slot thing, and so we need to maybe put someone else here. Mm-hmm. Against this team, against a Brock Bowers type of tight end, we can't put Jordan Clark, Thomas Harper, Micah Bell in that matchup. So we put maybe Cree Thomas in that matchup, or Jadon Blair in that matchup, or there's different things that you can do because you have different types of players. You know, man, they've got this really good slot that's a great blocker and a good route runner, and he's just going to physically beat up our 5'11", 185-pound nickel. So what we do this game is we're going to put Ivan Taylor in the slot and match up against him, or Jadon Blair. That's the thing that you're bringing to the table, Sean, is because you have that versatility. You can do more things if you get in a situation like, hey, because it doesn't matter in the regular season as much, but you get into the postseason, you get into the semis and the championship game, and all of a sudden, hey, we've got to be able to match up better against this guy from like the Devontae Smith. Because there's the other thing. What Bama did under Sark that was so good in 20 is you never knew where Devontae Smith was going to line up. Never knew. Now, some teams will say, hey, you're going to take your best corner and follow Devontae. But to me, that plays right into Alabama's hands because it's easier for a receiver to move around, in my opinion, than it is for a DB.
Yeah.
Because the technique playing slot and outside a receiver is a lot more similar than playing slot or outside a corner from a technique standpoint and an eye standpoint. But when you're going to say, hey, you want to go over into the boundary? Here's Dallas or Christian Gray or Benjamin Morrison. Like, you want to go to the field? Here's Christian Gray this year. Here's Jaden Mickey. Here's Micah Bell. Here's Creed Thomas. Here's Mark Zachary. Here's, you want to go in the nickel? We have all these options. You want to try to match up against our safeties? Right now, you're matching up against Ramon Henderson, DJ Brown. Advantage, good offense. Now, you're having to match up against Bronte Johnson, Jadon Blair, maybe Creed Thomas, right? Maybe Dallas Golden in certain looks, Ethan Long, and Ivan Taylor, right? It's a whole different ballgame if you can land these guys.
Yeah.
And so to me, that, like, of all the wins, if you land all three of those guys, even if it's just two, but if you land all three, and it's possible, that is the biggest shockwave that Notre Dame could send through the college football world, in my opinion. Because what Notre Dame will have said is we're not getting sleepers. Like, it's not a class full of Creed Thomas and Ethan Longs, right? Because those guys are sleepers. They're not respected the way I think they should be. You know my feeling on Creed Thomas.
Yeah.
That's a good football player. I don't give a crap what his rankings say. But Jadon Blair is a top 100 guy that's being recruited by everybody. Dallas Golden is a consensus top 100 player being recruited by everybody. Mark Zachary is a top 100 recruit being recruited by everybody. I think if you land that 6, Ivan Taylor was that way. Top 100 recruit being recruited by everybody. I believe at least 4, if not 5, of those DBs would have an Alabama or a Georgia offer, I believe, if Notre Dame gets them.
Yeah. At
least 4. So to me, that is the shockwave. And here's the difference. There's been years where we've had these pipe dreams, dream classes, and it's like you just hope you get 1 or 2 of them. Like, honestly, if I were a betting man right now, I would be willing to bet you that Notre Dame's the leader for all 3 of those kids right now. At the very worst, 1B. At the very worst, 1B. Would you say that's
safe? That's safe to say. Yes. Yeah.
Now, there's closing to be done.
Oh, absolutely.
But there's a chance that this could end up being a very special DB class, unlike something we haven't seen in forever at Notre Dame. And they are obviously doing a great job of, number one, taking advantage of a Notre Dame grad possibly being the best safety, or having literally 2 of the top 5 safeties in the NFL be Notre Dame guys. Sean, you could argue that the best safety of the previous generation, meaning like 5 was a Notre Dame guy.
Right.
And the best safety of this generation could end up being a Notre Dame guy.
A Notre Dame guy.
Who's the second guy? You talking about Alohi? Or are you talking about
No, I was talking about Harrison and Kyle.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So
I was talking about Harrison Smith.
I got it.
Yeah. I was talking about those 2 guys. Like, those are 2 of the top 5 safeties.
Of the last decade, 100%.
And that's the sell. And you have opportunity here. That's the thing. Like, there's opportunity. You can play early at Notre Dame at safety and at cornerback. Like Mike Mickens has shown you he's going to play you.
Right.
You're not just coming here to sit.
Safety also too, Sean. Yeah, they play.
Yeah, every year. I said safety initially first. I think the greatest opportunity is to play early at safety. Right now.
Somebody just said that Julian Love is a Pro Bowler. That's true, but I don't know if it carries the same weight because Julian didn't play safety at Notre Dame.
No.
He played corner at Notre Dame. So, I mean, that's the thing is, like, can you go play safety at Notre Dame and become that guy? And Alohi Gilman's turned into a good football player from everything I'm hearing from people around the NFL too, Sean. So, but that's the thing is, like, it helps when you have a Kyle. Don't think that these kids don't know that Kyle Hamilton played at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? Like, it matters. It matters. So that's my must get. Sean, my number 5 is, here's a group of 10 linebackers. You got to get at least one of them.
It's funny you said that because I said 2 of these 3 guys, but yeah, go right.
Okay, who's your 2 or your 3? Because I promise you those 3 will be on my list.
Noah McHale and the Jones boys, Marco and Christian. I'm like 2 of these 3. I'm happy with either combination.
I'd throw Nathaniel Owusu Boateng in there for me.
Yeah, Yeah.
But that's Marco. And Marco's a guy that could end up maybe moving to Viper, but I'd give him a shot at linebacker.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
See, everybody sees the size, and like with Jadon Blair, I have a buddy.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, at that size, he's going to grow into linebacker. But what makes you think that? Like, how about we, just stop? Just because it's not about how big you are; it's about how do you move. And when I watch Marco Jones move, I'm like, yeah, could he be a Viper? Heck yes, he could. He could be an elite edge player. I think he could also be an elite Mike or an elite Will as well. Like, let's let it happen naturally. But yes, Christian Jones is on there. Nathaniel Wusu Boateng is on there for me. And then my feeling on Noah McHale, Sean.
Yeah.
I think that kid is
fantastic.
Oh, he's special. He could be special. And he's another guy that I look at him like that kid he's just a football player. He doesn't even really he doesn't even know, like, really technically doesn't play a real sound football game. He just flies all over the field and just makes plays. And Madden Ferriemo is another guy that's on my list. He's an elite dude. He's not really on Notre Dame's radar. I mean, they like him, but until he gets to campus this spring or summer, and I don't know of a visit that's been set up yet. You or Ryan may know, but he's another guy that has the talent for that one.
Mm-hmm.
But right now for me, I don't count him as necessarily a realistic option.
Okay.
Right now. Now, if he becomes one, then you can add him to the list.
Yeah.
Like if I found out tomorrow he was setting up a visit for April or June, I'd be like, all right, cool, add him to the list. But yeah, you get two of those guys, Sean. That's pretty good. The only reason I went one is because I feel like with the needs at linebacker, you only need one to kind of close the gap to where I feel like, okay, you got Kingston and Bodie and Teddy last year. You got Drake and Jaden and Preston the year before. You're going to sign 6 DBs, 2 of which can play a ton in the nickel, or 3 of which can play a ton in the nickel. Because that's the thing that we have to understand as fans is when you're looking at Notre Dame's depth chart at linebacker, you can't think, well, they got 3 linebacker spots. They have to be at least 3 deep at all spots. No, because if you're going to look at it that way, the nickel last year played more snaps than the rover. So if you're going to count snaps for that position, you have to also include the rovers, which if you say, well, Notre Dame's only got 8 linebackers on this team. Okay, but you have to add in Jordan Clark. You have to add in Micah Bell. You have to add in Clarence Lewis. So actually they have 11 because those guys are going to line up in that position. When they're there, that guy's off the field. So it's not like old school 4-3 where, you got your Sam, your Mike, and your Will, and you need to be 3 deep at all of those. And that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah, so that's my one. But you just got to get one. If you get 2, Sean, it's like, okay, now you're just showing off.
Now you're showing off.
Now you're just showing off. Yeah, now you're showing off. But that would make me very, very happy. Very, very happy. So that's our must gets, Sean, in the 2025 class. The more of those guys they get, the higher ranked this class is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, the more talented this class is going to be. I think this defensive class has a chance to be a truly special, historic class. You can't be there if you don't get Shanklin, if you don't get Golden and Zachary, if you don't get Jadon Blair, and if you don't get one of those linebackers. Would you say that's fair?
That's
it could be really good,
yeah,
but it can't be the historic, like, program changing
transformational. Yeah.
That you know what I mean? Like, if you only get a couple of those guys, can you still win a title? Sure. But what I'm saying is on defense, that has a chance to be a historic class. If you can get those guys, you have to, but you got to hit the inside straight, right? And you got to keep the guys that you have in the class. You have to keep Burgess. You have to keep Davion. You have to keep Cree Thomas. You have to keep Ethan Long. And of course you have to keep Ivan Taylor. To me, those are the guys that you can't afford to lose in this class. And if you're going to talk about order, I mean, Ivan Burgess are at the top of that. Davion's kind of next for me. But and then you got to close on those other guys we mentioned, Sean. And it's possible. I think they're in a good position with all those guys.
Absolutely. That's the great thing about it, right? That's the great thing about it. You go into position with those guys that we're saying are gap closers, difference makers, can cause your defensive recruiting to be transformational for the program to where 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're looking back and it's a documentary on Peacock. Like, this is the class that started the run. or like got you 2 to 3 national
Right.
championships. This is one of the best defenses we've ever seen in a 2 to 3 year stretch at Notre Dame. It can be that type of recruiting class if they can seal the deal.
Yeah.
And knowing that they're going into the spring and into the summer officials at the top for a lot of these guys, and what we just talked about, feeling good about the coaching staff and where it stands. That can be a powerful combination for Notre Dame when it comes to National Signing Day in 2024.
That's going to incredibly well said. That's going to do it for the recruiting section of the RTCF show. We're going to get into some college football conversation next. But before we do, folks, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, as someone pointed out earlier, but only if you haven't already done so. We want you unsubscribing. Share this podcast. And if you have not done so, I'm going to challenge y'all again. If you have not done so, you've even remotely thought about it, if you have not signed up for the message board, do it. Take the plunge. It's inexpensive. It's $4.99 a month. As I've said, if you just sign up now and do a monthly and just get us through fall camp, get us through the summer and the fall camp, I promise you're going to be hooked. Promise you're going to be hooked. Just give it a shot. And it's also a way for you to support what we're doing at Irish Breakdown and what we're trying to build here at Irish Breakdown. So if you're not done so, go to boards.irishbreakdown.com, sign up. I challenge you. If you're a supporter of Irish Breakdown and you've not signed up for the message board, you're missing out, my friend. You're absolutely missing out. And then as Andrew Gilmore said, you can watch the epic roasting of him that is currently happening. He's taking it like a champ, man. He is. He really is. I'm only bringing this up because he said it first. He said he's getting roasted on the board for his take about the Notre Dame schedule. And I love it. And Andrew's a recent sign up as well. So he took that plunge as well. So definitely go check that out, guys. I think you'll really, really enjoy it. Let's dive into part 3 of today's show, Sean, and that is going to be, I guess, tonight's show. That is going to be the top 5 coordinators in college football. Big shout out to my guy, Jason Smith, who's been with us all the time on the boards. I have not seen Jason tonight, but I'm sure he'll listen to this on the replay if he's not with us tonight. But he asked this question in the mailbag the other day, Sean, and it was, who are the top 5 coordinator duos in college football? And I said, man, that is a great RTCF topic for Sean and I to get into, because I knew you'd be a little salty with me if I had that conversation in a solo show. Like, man, come on, man. You couldn't have waited for the weekend to do the show with me? Seriously? Am I wrong, Sean?
No, you're not wrong at all. You probably would have gotten a call that night. Like, hey, what was that? That's what we're doing now?
This is a fun conversation, especially, Sean, because I think there's a Notre Dame duo that's in it.
Yeah.
Obviously. But there's been so much coordinator movement this offseason as well. And who my top 5 are right now and who the top contenders are, some of them would not have been there 2 months ago, a month ago. So we're going to get in there now, Sean. And you and I have not discussed this list yet.
No.
So I'm going to give my 5, and then I'm going to give your 5, or I want you to give your 5, and then we'll discuss the list.
Okay.
Mine's, I have not actually done this is my definitive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just my 5.
5. Okay.
Just so we're clear. So when I give the list, it's not saying this is my 1, this is my 2. I haven't done that yet, but here's my 5. And I know one of them for sure. The board is going to go nuts. The chat's going to go nuts. They're going to strongly disagree with me. You might as well. Here's my 5. Notre Dame, Ohio State, Florida State, Oregon with an asterisk, Utah. That's my 5.
We have three similar.
5?
I had Notre Dame, Ohio State, Florida State, Louisville.
Okay.
I had Louisville. And then, look, I really wanted to include Oregon, but because I feel like Sark is the play caller.
At Texas, yeah.
And I think Kukowski has done a pretty decent job.
Yeah. They've had a top 12 efficiency defense the last 2 years.
Yeah. And I would have, if all of the changes, well, I also thought about Georgia, because to me, Mike Bobo, I thought he did a nice job, because everybody was worried about the offense. He really wasn't as successful the first time as offensive coordinator. Could he follow up what Todd Monken did at Georgia, winning back-to-back championships? the Georgia offense with Carson Beck as a first-time starter was actually, I mean, they actually played better once Brock Bowers got hurt,
Yeah.
which I thought was a big feather in
Yeah.
Mike Bobo's cap.
Did you
last
say who
season.
your 5 was? Is it Is Georgia who you're going with? Is that who
No.
you're going with?
I
Or
said
you're not there yet?
No. I said Notre Dame, Ohio State, Texas, Louisville,
and Louisville. Okay.
Florida State, Louisville. Yes.
So the two we have different are Texas and Louisville. The Texas one, Sean, they're my next in line.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I don't have them there yet is because I need to see their offense repeat what they did a year ago. Like that's kind of my big thing. Actually, their defense has been more consistent the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And not a lot of people talk about their defense this year with Pete Kwiatkowski was a sub 19 point per game defense in the Big 12. It was a down year in the Big 12. I kind of want to see how they do in the SEC. Like, that's going to be an interesting one, but I am not going to push back on Texas. Let's first talk about the ones we have in common, Sean. So let's start with Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a no-brainer. I went back and looked at the FEI, the Fermo Efficiency Index, and Notre Dame to me has Notre Dame, according to Brian Fermo, who I think does very good work on the FEI. It's an efficiency index, so it takes in the schedule and all those type of things. They have the offensive coordinator that was ran the number 2 offense in the country last year in efficiency, and they have the D coordinator that ran the number 6 offense in the country last year. When you look at Georgia was 3-11, Texas was 17-7, and then USC, actually interesting, is 7-9. I'll get into them in a little bit, but Florida State was 29-10. Now, Florida State's a bit of an asterisk for me because their number in the FEI plummeted in the last 3 weeks of the season. Once Jordan Travis got hurt, they plummeted. They were closer to top 10 prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
Florida State is the one I have that I think is the most debatable for me. Utah also is debatable because of how this past season. But if you look at how good they were in years prior, they just had one of those really weird, ravaged by
injuries at the quarterback.
They were 11-7 on offense and defense each of the last 2 years.
Yeah.
With, you know what I mean? And even on defense, this year, with all the injuries, they were still 14th in efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I had Utah there. But Notre Dame, number 1, 2 top 10 offense and defense coordinators. Ohio State is interesting because the defense last year was number 2. Chip Kelly's offense last year at UCLA was only 61st. But I got to tell you, Sean, I was actually very impressed by what Chip Kelly was able to do offensively this year when you consider the talent they had and when you consider the fact that they just could not find a quarterback. They were 11th the year prior with, the Dorian Robinson Thompson kid, who I think is just an okay quarterback, to be completely honest with you. You give him the weapons they're going to have at Ohio State, they're there. The only concern I have, Sean, and I'm curious what you think of this. The only concern I have is how is Chip going to handle not being the head coach? But this is different than like Dino Babers going to Arizona, where Dino hasn't actually run the offense at Syracuse in a long time. Even though Chip was the head coach, he was still the play caller, I believe, at UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious how that transition is going to go. But honestly, at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think Ohio State's in the conversation I think Ohio State and Notre Dame, if you just look at the numbers, have the 2 best resumes.
Yeah.
Of the groups in here where there's just a track record of big time success.
Guys they've done it. They've done it. It's proven. I agree with that. They were the no-brainers for me, just off the bat.
Yeah.
And Chip Kelly making the move, I think, is going to take away something that's been missing from Ohio State, and that is
a lack of softness.
Right. It's not even, it plays into softness, but Ryan Day is just so we talked about this, right? Great offensive minds. And I remember I texted you this week and I said, yo, what is it about Spags that he can paint this illusion to great play callers? Don't run the ball. You can't run the ball. With Nickel. He somehow gets great play callers to go away from what they have on the field that could be effective. And in my opinion, that is something that I think Al Golden does well.
Yeah.
I think Al Golden does the same thing, right?
Masterful at baiting people.
Masterful at baiting people and getting them to play outside of their strength. And so when you talk about these top two, what Chip Kelly is going to bring is that you could lure Ryan Day out of doing something that would help him win the game. Chip Kelly, he loves to run. He loves to run. And I don't think, as long as this offensive line can get the job done, Chip Kelly's going to run the ball.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be a challenge for Michigan because they're facing a totally different play caller. Because I think Michigan had gotten very comfortable with Ryan Day.
Well, and they just knew that when it push comes to shove, we can punch them in the mouth on offense, and there's not a lot they're going to do about it. They're just, we're going to out scheme them because they baited Ohio State into so many throws in the second half. They could show things to kind of get them. They know the checks that Ohio State makes to get out of the run game, and they could basically just line up and force Ohio State to throw the football. And they knew, if we line up like this, we know we're going to force them into a throw game. Chip Kelly will say, no, I'm going to check to a different run. I'm going to out leverage you, and we're going to get out the gate because we're going to pin and pull you in, and we're going to get outside and run it out. So, you know what I mean? Like, or we're just going to quickly gap you upside. You want to bring that heavy outside pressure on 3rd and 7. That's fine. I'll go empty and do a bam and just gash you right at the middle. And it's a mentality that we talk about. And you and I were talking a lot the other day about culture and what that means in football. It's a mentality aspect, right? It's who you are, what defines you, what's your DNA. Culture's your DNA. And like it's not even like societal culture where that is more of a learned experience. Culture in football, it's like it's who you are as a football team. It's your heart. It's the blood running through your proverbial body, right? It's all that type of stuff. And Chip is just, it's about toughness. It was like that at Oregon. It's like that at UCLA. And Ohio State has been grossly missing that. And if you look at the teams at Ohio State that won titles, I mean, why did they win a title in 2014? Because when they got in trouble against Alabama, they just said, we're just going to run it down their throat. And we're just going to out physical them. And then Ezekiel Elliott went off in the second. I remember, people forget, like, Bama was up like what, 17-3, 20-3, and we're on the verge of scoring. And then Blake Sims, I think, threw a pick, and then after that, it was like Ohio State was like, "You gave us the in," and they just out physicaled them the rest of the way. And the further away that Ryan Day has gotten from Urban Meyer, the softer his offense has become. And I'm gonna tell you right now, if he didn't make the decision to hire Jim Knowles a year ago, the Ohio State would have lost 4 or 5 games this year.
Oh, absolutely.
They beat Ohio State by 2 touchdowns if they would have had the previous coaching staff before Jim Knowles. I'm telling you that right now. That was a great hire. He did a great job, and he got that defense going faster even than I expected it to.
Yeah.
And I thought, because in the just track record, year 3 was the big jump year for him at past places, but Ohio State had better players. But then it's similar to Notre Dame, right? I mean, that year 2 jump, because Al Golden runs a complex defense, that year 2 jump was huge. You're going to have a lot of guys coming back. And then obviously with Mike Denbrock, it's that proven track record of winning in different ways. And I would actually argue that Mike Denbrock has won in more different ways than Chip Kelly has. When Chip Kelly's won at Oregon, and you said it looked exactly like this. You know, the run schemes were different because Zach Charbonnet compared to, LaMarcus Joyner is this different type of back, but it was still tempo, running the football for 1 million yards and all that kind of stuff. Mike Denbrock's run with completely different looking offenses during his tenure. And so I think those are no-brainers. Florida State was the other one that you and I had in common as well, correct?
Right. Yep.
I think Alex Atkins has done a really nice job. He's going to his 3rd year running the offense. I think what helps them is he does have the Mike Norvell influence. Norvell, from what I understand, lets the offensive coaches coach, but he's still involved in a healthy way because he's a good offensive mind. Adam Fuller did a really nice job with that defense last year.
He did.
And now we'll see if they can continue. But I like the portal additions Florida State had this offseason. I think people are sleeping on Florida State as a top 10 team again this year. And I understand, DJ Uiagalelei, and they lost this guy and that. I understand all that, but they're going to be a good football team again this year. They will. And a big part of my confidence comes from, I have a lot of confidence in what they do schematically. And to me, just the Georgia game should be out of sight, out of mind for people, because like they literally played their backup team. The number 2 offense and defense for Florida State played in the bowl game. There's no other way to say it than that, Sean. I mean,
and I felt so bad because they came out with a lot of heart early. They came out with a lot of heart, and then all of a sudden it was like they realized, like, yeah, it's almost like you come out and you have all this speed and you're out punching your opponent. They're just taking all your punches. And the next thing you know, it's like Drago, right? Like,
right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Against Apollo Creed, right? And then all of a sudden things start to turn.
Yeah.
And that's what we watch.
Yeah. When we were kids, right? You're playing Mike Tyson's Punch Out, and you'd hit Mike Tyson 50 times. Didn't phase him, and then boom, uppercut, lights out, Little Mac's done. I mean, that's pretty much what it was, right?
Right.
Like,
one of your punches takes away this much of his
it's
power.
like, well, time to restart it.
Right.
Go through it again. Yeah, they did a really nice job last year. Let's talk. So Louisville, to me, here's why. I'll let you state your case for Louisville first, and then because Louisville's on my if you look at the list I sent you, they're on my teams to consider list.
Yeah.
But there's a reason I didn't put them in. And now when we talk about Louisville, we're including Jeff Brom.
Oh, absolutely.
And Brian Brom, because Jeff Brom, I believe, is still the play caller.
Mm-hmm.
So just so we're including that. So let's go with Louisville. Actually, no, Texas was your number 4. Louisville's your number 4. Who's your number 4? Or do you even have a 4? Or is it?
No, I didn't do 4. I just did 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go Louisville, since that's the team that Notre Dame plays.
Yeah,
what's your case for Louisville?
Tremendous amount of respect for Jeff Brom. Mm-hmm. Tremendous amount of respect as a play caller and the way he schemes things up. And I think Ron English did an incredible job with that defense, because they got a lot of transfers in, a lot of one-year players, and he was able to pull them together. And if you look at them until they got some key injuries in the secondary late in the season, their defense was really solid. Mm-hmm. Teams were able to get at them in the passing game and a little bit off of that passing game, running the ball later in the season. I think the Kentucky game was a perfect example of that, right? Kentucky was able to take advantage of them in the passing game. And Devin Leary didn't exactly have the greatest season through the air at Kentucky. But in that last game, they were really able to be balanced and run the ball with Davis, not as efficiently as they had done, but run him enough and then make big plays in the passing game. And it was just too many injuries in the secondary. And Ron English likes to be aggressive. He wants to be aggressive. He wasn't able to be as aggressive because of that late. And I really came to kind of appreciate the combination. Like, you know what? Ron English might not be on the same level as Brom, but he's getting there. And I feel like if he had like Notre Dame talent, or he had the level of talent that Georgia has, I think where he could be aggressive. Al Golden knows he can be aggressive because he has this back end, right? But if Benjamin Morrison got hurt, would Al Golden be as aggressive as he likes to be? He probably would, because then he would have Jaden Mickey and still Christian Gray. But that's what I'm talking about. Louisville didn't have that same depth in the secondary, to whereas when they lost a guy, they could keep doing that. So I just have respect. I really like what I saw from English this year, and I have, man, you know the respect I have for Jeff Brom, going back to his days at Purdue.
And you know that you and I are on the same boat there.
Yeah.
And I was calling for him to be the head coach of Notre Dame back when he was still at Western Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Here's my thing with Ron English. Number one is I need to see him do it again. Mm-hmm. That's my issue, right? So like when we're talking about other coaches on this list, Morgan Scalley has had a really good defense for 3, 4, 5 years in a row. You know, now Andy Ludwig's not Jeff Brom, but he's a lot closer than the other conversation, because Ron English's defenses at Purdue tried hard, but they were not good. And you know, I never loved his defenses at Michigan, to be honest with you. The 06 and 07 defenses at Michigan always kind of struggled in some of the bigger games. You know, but you can't really hold that against him. It really just comes down to he was a D coordinator for 2 years at Purdue. Prior to that, he hadn't been a D coordinator since he was at Louisville in 08. You know what I mean? So it's like, for me, I just, if we're having this conversation in a year, it won't shock me if we're both have them on there. especially with getting Tyler Barron, the two safeties from Louisville, like they've upgraded their roster. But I need to see him do it for a second year in a row to be good before I can go there. And I also think that yes, they had some bad results early, but I also thought that they had some pretty rough results early. I mean, late, but they had some rough results early as well. I mean, Georgia Tech moved the ball up and down the field on them in the opener. Indiana threw the ball pretty well on them. Boston College moved the ball really well on them early. They kind of got hot in the middle of the year from like NC State to Duke, and then or Virginia Tech. Then to your point, they faltered late because of some of the injuries. But like even the Kentucky game, Sean, like they only gave up 289 total yards. They gave up 6.2 yards per play.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really give them a ton of credit for the Florida State game because Florida State was a banged up offense. It's hard to really. Neither team was 100% going in
that championship game. Yeah,
neither team was 100%.
No.
And then again, I don't care about the bowl game. They had half their team didn't play in that game. I don't really care about that. So it was a little too inconsistent in year one for me on defense for Louisville to put them in the top 5. If he can build on that and kind of have a repeat year next year, they could be there. And that's kind of where I'm at with Oregon, Sean, because number one, Will Stein's offense was phenomenal this year. Yeah. And he was a really good play caller at UTSA. So, I mean, they had the number one efficiency offense in college football this year. I mean, so he took an offense that was really good under Kenny Dillingham and made it even better.
Yeah.
And I love what he does schematically and tempo-wise and run game-wise. I love what he does. His offense was less quarterback run dependent compared to what Kenny Dillingham's was the year before, Bo Nix, which I liked, which it kind of needed the year before. Because they had lost the one kid who transferred to USC and I mean, and all that type of stuff. But what I like is the reason Oregon's on mine is because I give him an asterisk because even though I don't think Dan Lanning is the play caller, I think Dan Lanning is heavily, and I talked with somebody I know that covers Oregon just to confirm this, he's very heavily involved in the defense. And so that's why I put them on there because what a lot of people forget is Oregon was pretty good on defense this year. I mean, they were the number 13 efficiency defense this year. They were number 15 a year ago. And so they've actually done a pretty good job of building up that defense at Oregon, and they inherited a situation, Sean, in my opinion, under Mario Cristobal. That was the Achilles heel for that football team under Mario Cristobal was they couldn't play defense against good teams. They've been a top 15 defense the last 2 years with Tosh and him. So I also think they're going into a league that has far less impact offenses than what they had in the Pac-12.
Agreed. Yeah.
So, I mean,
but this is where it gets interesting. What we did see is that when they got to Washington didn't beat them 3 consecutive times in 2 years because of the passing game. They beat them because of Dylan Johnson in their running game. And they went up to Oregon in 2022 and ran the ball really well in a close win. So
second time it was that way. Time it was that way. Yeah.
So for me, it is okay. In big games, the run game has been able to get going against your defense. You're going into more of a run-oriented conference. So that's going to be, for me, teams are going to be more willing to run. Penn State
type of running, but yes, I get your point.
Penn State will be willing to line up because Penn State defensively can say, okay, we feel like defensively we can play with you. Right. We're going to force you to consistently stop the run and see if you're willing to do that. Because in the Pac-12, I feel like this is my thing. If you're the best run defense in the Pac-12, most teams in the Pac-12 aren't going to be committed to the run.
And the ones that do, well, the only two teams that are really committed to the run that I felt were Oregon and Oregon State. Mm-hmm. One of them you don't play,
right?
It's you,
right?
And then there's the other one, and then you got to look at how they performed in those games, and it's a mixed bag. This year they completely shut down Oregon State's run game, completely shut it down. Last year, Oregon State almost ran for 300 yards against them. So yeah, there have been, I think the Washington game too, but like the game you're talking about, they held Washington under 100 yards the first time they played rushing. And then the second time they had some key runs, but it wasn't volume. They ran for like $157.
No. Right? Washington knew
it was the key runs in those key moments, to your point, that you could look at and say, well, the numbers weren't that impressive. What are you talking about? But it was like they couldn't make stops when they needed to make stops. That is a legitimate knock.
Yeah.
But And I don't have Oregon's defense in my top 5. It's the combination of them because I think their offense is top 3 in my opinion with what they're doing right now with Will Stein.
Absolutely.
And they're going into a conference because it's the counter to what you said about the defense. Defenses in the Pac-12 in the Big Ten are going to have a tough time with Oregon's offense, in my opinion.
Yes,
because
it's a different type of run game,
right? And it's a different type of tempo and a different type of perimeter speed,
in
my opinion. Yes,
which I think bodes well because now I think the Big Ten is forced recruiting wise. If coaches are smart, the only team that's ready to play them on the perimeter is probably Michigan. Would have a good chance to play them on the perimeter with the defensive backs they had remaining. And then Ohio State constantly has talent and safeties. They get Caleb down. So those are 2 teams. And then Penn State usually puts a lot of NFL defensive backs on the field as well. And linebackers.
Sean, we've said this, man. Nobody wastes more talent on defense than what James Franklin does. Nobody wastes more NFL talent than James Franklin.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're having like walk-on special teamers running 4.3s at the combine. I mean, it's just ridiculous, Your 5, you had Texas. This is the one I had. For me, it came down to Texas and Utah. And the reason I went with Utah is just because of I have a similar issue about Texas's defense that you have about Oregon's offense. Statistically, it's very good. It was good enough for them to get to the postseason. But to me, in a couple of the big games, like I thought Texas's defense the last couple of years, it benefited from, if we're being honest, the Big 12 has not had the kind of offenses that they've had in the past, the last couple of years, for the most part. Now, and when you did watch Texas last year against the couple of good offenses that they faced, the results were a mixed bag. They did great against TCU, got shredded by Kansas State, right? And so, to me, the fact that they did well against Bama this year, but my stand, we had that debate the other day. Oklahoma went for over 200 on both capacities, running and passing. Their run game after that was phenomenal. Run defense after that was phenomenal, but they sacrificed it to they gave up some 3 games of over 300 yards passing. Now, part of that is they had like 3 freshmen. They had 3 freshmen playing a ton of football in the secondary, right? So to me, the combination of their defense not being great in some of the bigger games and the offense really just being being really good for 1 year, I think they're going to be there this year, but I need to see it first offensively. With Utah, the thing is, like, Texas has taken elite talent and said, okay, we're going to take advantage and just have better players than everybody else. And I thought there were stretches of the season where Texas wasn't as dominant as they should have been compared to their talent advantage. A lot of that's because they were young. And that's why I think Texas is going to be really good in 2024, because a lot of those young guys are now going to be sophomores and juniors, whereas this year they were freshmen and sophomores. And so now, looking forward, I think Texas is going to be there, but I can't put them there yet because it's not like we're not putting Mike Denbrock and Al Golden on this list because of what we think they're going to do. We're putting them on this because of what they are
already done.
And so for me, with Texas, that's kind of why I'm there with them. Is I just need to see that offense do it a second year. Now, I think Sark is going to be great at it, but if the defense was better in some of the bigger games, I would have him in there because I do think Sark is a top 5 offensive mind. The results just haven't matched it at Texas up until this past year. So I will push back against no one who wants to have Texas on there. But the reason I went with Utah is, number one, the consistency of the last few years. The fact that Utah has been at their best in big games, like that's when Utah shines. It's exact opposite of what we said with some other teams. Like when Oregon and Utah played a couple years ago in 2021, this is in the Mario Cristobal era, and neither one of those years was Utah in the same boat, the same league as Oregon talent-wise. But they kicked Oregon's butt both times because they were incredibly well coached. And they took Ohio State down to the wire, despite the fact they had one of their running backs was playing cornerback in that game because they were so banged up and had kids out because they were schemed incredibly well. And so to me, Sean, when I look at Utah, it's that maximizing of their potential.
Yeah.
You ask yourself, man, what would Ludwig and Morgan Scalley do if they had Oregon's roster? You know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
What would they do if they had Sark's roster or Bama's roster?
Yeah.
That's the thing for me. The results may not be as sexy as what others say, but when you look at the efficiency numbers, not many people can say they've had a top 10 caliber offense in 2 of the last 3 years and defense in 2 of the last 3 years than Utah. And that's why for me, I feel like every year Utah's winning more games than they should. Where other teams, you're just like, man, why isn't that team winning more? Or why aren't they winning more impressively? But the big game nature too. Somebody in the chat said, I'm glad they didn't hire Andy Ludwig because Mike Denbrock's way better. I would argue that Mike Denbrock's better. I would push back strongly against the notion that he's way better. Right? Utah had a bad year because they were playing their third-string quarterback, former walk-on most of the year, and they were completely banged up.
That
does not dismiss the 20 years. Let's not. You remember when Bama got beat in 2008 by Utah? Got out. Nick Saban got out coached for 60 minutes. You know who the OC was on that team? Andy Ludwig. Right? We can say, dude, I'm so. It worked out great for Notre Dame because even if they're on the same page as coaches, Mike Denbrock's a much better recruiter.
Exactly.
Right. So, like, yes, it worked out for Notre Dame. I'm thrilled. I'm super fired up that Mike Denbrock's the OC. But let's not now start putting disrespect on Andy Ludwig's name. That's a phenomenal football coach. There's a reason we all wanted that to happen last year. Didn't work out. It's about how you respond to it. Marcus Freeman responded beautifully to it, and it worked out great for Notre Dame. But it would have worked out great if Andy Ludwig was here too. Let's not kid ourselves.
That was
right.
The way the offense for Utah went last year was Notre Dame fans' excuse to say, "See, we got it right." No, you didn't. No, you didn't. No, the way it went down was horrible. It was a mistake. And now because you had Mike Denbrock, it's like, well, it's a blessing in disguise. That still does not excuse the fact that the way it was handled was horrible. It was a mistake.
Right.
And you missed out on the opportunity to get a really good offensive coordinator. Right. And be thankful that the college football gods shine down upon us.
Yes.
And we ended up with Mike Denbrock.
Yes.
Instead of year 2 of Derek Parker.
Brian Kelly for some dumb things he did this offseason, which I told you about.
Right.
Yeah. So we can say, hey, you know what? Here's where I look at it, folks. This is what should have you excited. 2 years in a row, Marcus Freeman's top target for OC was a heck of a football coach. And leave it at that. Yes, it's worked out well for Notre Dame, but it would have also worked out well because we'd be talking about going into year 2 of Andy Ludwig, and we'd be pretty fired up about it. Right? That's what we would be talking about. So it was a win-win. Ludwig last year, Denbrock this year. I prefer Denbrock, which is why Notre Dame's higher on the list for me. But that's a heck of a combination at Utah. Texas was my next one on the list, Sean. So you talked about your 5, right? Here's some that were next up for me. Texas was next in line. I'm not going to push back on anyone who wants to have Texas ahead of Utah. I think you could make a case for Texas being ahead of Utah, Oregon, and Florida State on my list. And those 2 plus Louisville on your list. Georgia, for me, did not make it because while I think their defense is outstanding, I need to see their offense. Like, I was not as high on their offense this year as you and some others seem to be, because I think their offense just out-talented people, to be completely honest with you. And especially in the second half. And I never watched those games and be like, man, Mike Bobo was coaching circles around this guy, like we would see with Todd Monken. And that's also why I think when you saw them play teams with somewhat equal talent, they struggled early in those games. You know, they struggled against South. I mean, they're losing 14-3 at halftime against South Carolina. They struggled, early against Auburn. If you remember, they had to come back late and won that game because they just said, okay, let's start throwing the ball to Brock Bowers. Where was that in the first half? You know what I mean? And, we saw that at times this year where it's Missouri. It was just, you have better players than they have. Against Alabama in the bowl game too. I mean, you got out-coached in that game. Flat out, your offense got out-coached in that football game. So I'm just not there. I'm just not there with Mike Bobo. The numbers look great, but it's kind of like, but Larry Coker's first team at Miami looked pretty freaking good too. right? Like, you inherited a pretty good situation. Let's see how you are as you get further and further away. Because like you can look at the results were great, but when I watched Georgia, I just didn't see the same kind of team from a preparation and a play calling standpoint that I saw with Todd Monken.
Well, my respect for Mike Bobo was not about when he had the horses.
Right.
Carson Beck played better once Brock Bowers, he got them through. Everybody thought, okay, they're going into 3 of their toughest games without Brock Bowers.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, the kid, like, he got the kid to play at his best without his best player. So for me, I was like, yo.
It was 2 games, right?
And this was not a typical Georgia run offense this year. Now, that can be something that you can point to.
Right.
Because they had injuries on the offensive line.
They had some injuries. They were a young offensive line.
Yeah. Monroe Freeland ended up playing a lot.
Yeah, their running backs are just they're solid.
Nothing special.
Yeah, they're not special. No, I actually don't fault him for that. I think they were kind of bad. But the 2 games he missed, though, were against Florida and Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. Missouri game I thought was pretty well schemed. Pretty well played. I don't know if I'd say well schemed, but I think that was, to your point, Sean. I think that was also good because you just said, "Hey, guys, got to step up."
Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't just Brock Bowers either. If you're wanting to make
McConkey was hurt. McConkey was hurt too. Yeah,
he missed some of those games as well. But he did play against Florida, Missouri, and he went off in both games. So the case could be like, hey, he very rarely had Bowers and McConkey healthy at the same time. Very fair. Mm-hmm. Very fair. He didn't have an elite running back like he had Rumen he had in the past. The offensive line has some injuries. All that to me, Sean, is acceptable, which is why Georgia was the second team on my list off. Because, yes, he didn't do well the first go-round, but we have to also be willing to say maybe he's improved. Coaches get better. I mean, coaches learn. And it just, to me, there just was so much inconsistency this year. And there's reasons for it, but it still happened. It still happened. Because otherwise you say, well, like why not throw Jared Parker in there? Because Notre Dame's offense was top 10 in all these categories and scored 40-plus points a game 9 times and all that, you know what I mean? But it's like, yeah, but there was just too much inconsistency.
Yeah.
The difference is Georgia's offense did better in some of the bigger games than Notre Dame's, but like you get the point that I'm making. Here's another that they're on the list for me, Sean.
Well,
go ahead.
Quick question. Would you say that? Are you shocked that I think Todd Monken recruited to what he does? Mm-hmm. Todd Monken has their wide receiver core was very specialized, if you understand what I'm saying. Like they have guys
what he does
very specific to like packages, like Arian Smith. This is the speed guy. We're trying to go deep. He's in the game. St. Jack, this is our possession guy, 3rd down guy, right? And then Ladd is going to be, Dylan Bell is going to be our jet sweep guy. And I think once Monken left, I don't know if Bobo, which goes to like maybe now he recruits differently at the wide receiver position for what he wants to do, right? Maybe more traditional wide receivers that fit, because I think the Delp kid is pretty good. I think they have a pretty good tight end coming in the 24 class. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they have the next Brock Bowers.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Nobody else in college football has the next Brock Bowers either. They did get Benjamin Urasek from Stanford.
Right, on the transfer.
Right. They got a couple, the Landon Humphreys guy that a lot of people are high on from Vanderbilt, is a good football player. And their freshman class last year, I don't know, it didn't make a huge impact, but it has some kids I really like in it too. That I like the Tyler Williams kid.
Yeah.
I like it. He's pretty raw, but they've landed a couple kids, but they haven't recruited receiver great in recent years, because I still also feel like Todd Monken kind of had his eye on, we're going to go out and win these next couple things, and I'm going to do exactly what he did, just go to the NFL. But I also think just overall, George was able to out-talent people. And that's the thing, is like I just felt like that's what I saw a lot this year. It was just they'd fall behind early, and they just got better dudes than you have.
Yeah.
That's because like what you said, Sean, I mean, when Brock Bowers went down, it's not like the guy they were putting in was some bum.
No, Delp
You know
was
what
a
I
really
mean?
good
Like,
player.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, um, yeah, it's just kind of like when Alizé Mack went down in, what was it, 18?
Yeah.
Oh shoot, how are we going to survive
How
with
we gonna
Cole
survive
Kmet
with Cole
playing the next
Kmet?
couple weeks? You know what I mean? Like, how will we ever survive without
And
Alizé?
even with the injuries to off line, I mean, you got Monroe Freeland coming in
Right.
as a true freshman. It's
Right.
like,
It's kind of like we talk about Notre Dame. Yeah, you lose Joe Alt and you go to the bowl
yeah,
game, and how are you going to survive having to play Charles Jagasol, right? I mean, Monroe
yeah,
Freeland was our number one tackle
right,
in that previous class, or him and Jagasol were 1 and 2 in that
yeah,
previous class. He was the number one pure left tackle. I always, thought him at left and Charles at right would have been a lot of fun to watch. But
hmm,
we'll see George on that list, Sean. For me, here's another one that I think is very underrated, and I have a feeling I'm going to get some pushback on this one from the folks in the chat. I have Penn State as a team to watch out for this year too.
I
I
thought you were going
love the
somewhere
guy.
else, but
I got some more. Well,
yeah,
who did
go
you
ahead.
think I was going to say?
I really think the combination at Michigan State. I want to see what they
That's
do at
on my.
Michigan
That's
State,
my. Yes, that's on
but I
my.
love Lingering and
Yeah,
Rossi, and
yes.
I really
If
do.
Joe Rossi's defense hadn't struggled as much as it did this year,
Hmm,
they'd be right near in the conversation. They
hmm,
they are on my to watch list because I
yeah,
think and also Jonathan Smith is very involved in the offense.
an offense,
He
right?
brought his guy with him.
Hmm,
They're on my to watch list. But here's the one for me: it's Penn State. I love the guy they got from Kansas. I'm a big fan of him. I know Ryan loves him. Ryan's probably higher on him even than I am. But I think Tom Allen's a really good defensive mind. When you look at what he did at South Florida, he gave up 27 points per game in his 1 year at South Florida.
hmm,
But go back and look what they were the year before. They gave up 38, 37 points per game the year before. He took 10 off in 1 year.
yeah,
Then he goes to Indiana and does about the same thing at Indiana. And there was a couple of years, even when he was head coach, Indiana some pretty stingy defenses in a couple of those years. He just couldn't recruit. And he
yeah.
just wasn't a head coach. But I think he's a really good defensive coordinator, and he's walking into a pretty good situation. I think that's has a chance. Now, I want to see how they do under James Franklin,
Hmm.
but don't be shocked if we're talking about Penn State. I'll say this. I'm not a big James Franklin fan. You know that. But he made strong hires this offseason.
Absolutely.
Real strong hires this offseason. Another team on my list they're not there yet, but I got my eye on them is USC. Look, Lincoln Riley had a down year this year. I think Lincoln Riley's biggest problem the last 2 years, and Sean, you're going to get pissed when I say this, but let me explain, right? The biggest problem he had the last 2 years from a play calling standpoint was Caleb Williams, because he had such an elite talent that I think he did things that went outside of what I think he should have done. He forced Caleb to put the Superman cape on too many times and said, hey, this kid can do things nobody else can, so let's take advantage of that, where I think they should have been more like what they used to be and then mix in some of that stuff. They went away from running the football because I think he just kind of thought, how do I take the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands? And when they would run it, they were pretty good, like they did a couple years ago against Notre Dame. I think that they went away from, just to me, being the kind of team that they needed to be. I think he also did a really poor job of building the offensive line. The one thing he had at Oklahoma, and this is the biggest thing that we're going to learn about Lincoln Riley as head coach, he inherited Bill Bedenbaugh. That was a great. That's like taking over as the OC at Notre Dame, and
Hmm.
like Mike Denbrock did in 14, and having Harry Heastand.
Yeah.
Right, like you walked into a
Yeah.
pretty good situation, and so that's. But he's still a top 10 offensive mind easily. The DeAnton Lynn is an interesting one for me because he's a 1-year coordinator, and I got to see it for more years. But here's the deal. If you look at what I said for Notre Dame, they had the number 2 and the number 6 offense and defense last year. The play callers for the number 2 and the number 6 offense and defense are at Notre Dame. Oregon's 1-13. Florida State's 29-10. Georgia's 3-11. USC's 7-9. Because the UCLA defense was the number 9 efficiency defense last year. If y'all did not watch UCLA's defense last year, you missed out. That was a
Man.
really good defensive football team. A really good defensive football team last year. Now, was that DeAnton Lynn building on what had already been established? Maybe. But the year before, they gave up 29 points. Now, what I think D'Anton Lynn walked into was a pretty talented roster that he was able to mold and turn into a really good defense.
He could really come off the edge and broke the pass.
29 points per game the year before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, they had all talent, but it's kind of like Mike Elko having to take over for Brian Van Gorder, but he actually even had better numbers in his first year than Elko had when he replaced Van Gorder.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, I really like the job he did. The reason I can't put USC on there, Sean, is because I just need to see him do it for more than a year. It's exactly like I said with Ron English. I got to see him do it more than a year. But I think that was a strong hire by USC this offseason. Now, the question is, what's going to be answered this year, Sean? Here's the other thing. I still believe a big problem with USC is not that he makes bad coordinator hires. It's that the way he runs his program makes it hard to have a good defense.
Yeah.
That's what I think is true. Right? And so we're going to find out this year. If D'Anton Lynn can't do a good job with the talent he's going to have at USC, then we know the problem is not the defensive coordinator. The problem is the head football coach. So, but on paper, you've got the number 7 and number 9 play callers from last year, offense and defense.
Mm-hmm.
So that they have, to me, that alone makes us at least have to say, this could be interesting. Let's see what he does. Now, he's not going to have a loaded roster. The USC talent on defense is not elite. It's not like you're walking in and you've got 04 USC talent. You just don't have a good coach. Like they need to restock that roster a little bit, but there's plenty enough talent for them to have a top 15, top 20 defense this year. If Lincoln Riley is what he needs to be.
I wonder what you think about this, because going back to what we talked about in the first segment with the coaching staff that's been assembled at Notre Dame and the head guy learning his lessons and reacting quickly. I was shocked that Lincoln Riley didn't take notes from what Ludwig and I don't know why I just drew a blank on the DC at Utah.
Morgan Scalley.
What they did to him.
Yeah.
In that Pac-12 championship game. Like that should have been the sign, like, okay, this is how we're going to win it next year.
When what Ludwig did to him twice.
They made it a bloody, physical punch you in the mouth, and you're going to have to keep doing it. You can jump out on us early, but we're going to take you into deep water regardless.
You know what I think it was, Sean? I think he looked at it as an anomaly. He'd never been bloody. Like even the Tulane game, that was an outscore you game where you could just blame the defensive coordinator. Your offense put up a ton of points and yards. I think he looked at it as an anomaly. And, hey, they got me that time, but we hung 42 on them during the regular season against Utah. I think that's really what it boils down to for me. What happened to them this year is they got punched in the mouth, and they kept getting punched in the mouth, and they didn't do it. They couldn't do a dang thing about it. Because like this year, you could just look and say, well, if it was only the Notre Dame game where they struggled like that. But if you go back and watch, several games that year, they struggled up front against Arizona State, who's not even that good. They struggled in the trenches in a lot of games, and even some games where they ran for a lot of yards.
Utah dominated the trenches against them.
Yeah. I'm not Arizona State. I'm sorry. Arizona. They struggled to run the football. They struggled in the trenches against Utah, a beat up Utah team. They struggled they struggled to run the football against Cal. The last 3 games of the year against Oregon, UCLA, and Louisville, they ran for a combined total of 147 yards combined in those 3 games. This is tailback, like historically, this is tailback you.
Yeah.
You had Marshawn Lloyd and Austin Jones at running back. Like there was no excuse for you to be that bad running the football.
No.
And to your point, he didn't learn that lesson, but he did now, at least defensively. Now the question is going to be, does he learn his lesson offensively? That's the question. And here's the thing you got to ask yourself: did he succeed? Did Ryan Day succeed early at Ohio State as the OC and the head coach because he had Urban dictating they were going to be this way? And the further they've gotten away, they struggled. Was his success at Oklahoma driven by the fact that what he was handed, the Ferrari that he was handed by Bob Stoops with the coaching staff? Now, again, he was the OC for that, but Bob Stoops put that offensive staff together. He hired Bill Bedenbaugh, all those type of things. So to me, those are things you have to look at and say, can he fix those things? Because you can say, hey, like, here's a perfect example. Ryan Day got embarrassed by Michigan 2 years in a row, and he kept pushing buttons and blaming everybody for what happened, and it didn't change a dang thing.
No.
Are these moves for Lincoln Riley going to change anything? That's a question that we have.
Yeah.
And we'll have to find that out. And that's why they're not on my list, to be completely honest with you. Because, I mean, from what I saw from DeAnton Lynn this year, the guy did a heck of a job, and he's going to be going against the same teams, a lot of the same teams that he went against this year, and he's going to be going against – I mean, the thing of USC is going into a much worse offensive league. Now, the problem with the USC has is their schedule in year one's not exactly easy. And they actually have I'm going to pull it up right now, Sean. It's a pretty tough schedule. They play LSU in a non-conference game. They play Notre Dame in a non-conference game. They play at Michigan, home against Wisconsin, at Minnesota, home against Penn State, at Maryland, home against Rutgers, at Washington, home against Nebraska, and at UCLA. So they avoid Ohio State, and they avoid Oregon, but they still got to play LSU and Notre Dame non-conference. They still got to play at UCLA. They still got to play at Washington. They still got to play Penn State and Michigan and Wisconsin. So we're if they're good on defense this year, it'll be earned. There may be future years where maybe it's not as earned as much because they get a lot of the Purdue's and the Wisconsins and the Indianas on the schedule. But this year it'll be earned. So we're going to find out like right now. You know, if he's got the infrastructure in place to allow DeAnton Lynn to thrive at USC the way he did at UCLA, because at UCLA it was easier for DeAnton Lynn because you were playing an offense that was ball control, run the football, shorten the game. Now it's like, dude, you may make a stop, but you got to be on the field in 45 seconds of action. Not just because you went 3 and out, because you scored in 2 plays. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's a tougher deal, man. But it's the practice that leads to that. That would be the concern for me. The mentality of the team.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's going to be interesting in that matchup with LSU because those are 2 programs that are like swerving a little bit on ice, and both head coaches are trying to recover and straighten things back up because it's cat. You know, you don't want to start swerve. You don't want to tailspin.
The storyline is going to be great in that game, Sean. You have this offense at LSU that was phenomenal. If it wasn't for the 19 offense, that's a historic LSU offense.
Yeah,
right. It didn't seem so because of how amazing the 19 offense was.
Yeah,
but you've got Denbrock's gone, Jaden Daniels is gone, Malik Neighbors is gone, Brian Thomas is gone. You know, and then USC. You know, with the changes they're going through, it's going to be very, very fascinating. Let's go through a couple others, Sean, that are on our list. I'm going to give a couple that I also considered, and I want to hear a couple that you also had on your list. I did have Louisville on my list of teams to consider. Michigan State was on there. And again, if Joe Rossi's defense had not taken the big step back, they were like 80th in efficiency this year. I mean, part of it's because their offense was one of the worst offenses in college in the Power 5 level.
Yeah.
But if he hadn't taken that step back this year, it'd have been hard for me to keep Michigan State off my list. But I did still consider them. Got Utah, got all those. Here's another team, Sean, to me, that is in the conversation, and they would have been even higher if not for this year. Robert Anae's offense at NC State did not do very well early this year. But if you look at his track record of success and the job Tony Gibson has done, if Robert Anae can get that offense back on track, NC State's going to make some noise in the ACC because those are 2 traditionally, like historically, 2 excellent coordinators. Yeah. Robert Anae's offense just had some issues this year at NC State, but they were young. Yeah. I think the Brennan, I'll say this too, the Brennan Armstrong he had is not the same as the Brennan Armstrong at NC State. Because here's what people got to remember. It's kind of like Dane Chris. Well, how do you know Dane Chris is a bust? Well, because he went to Kansas and was just as bad. But my thing is, no, he was ruined at Notre Dame. And there was no fixing that. It's like with Malik at Florida. Like, the damage had kind of already been done there. The opportunities had been missed there. We've seen this with other quarterbacks, not just Notre Dame guys, but like they go somewhere else and they didn't play well there. Yeah, but they'd already been kind of damaged beyond
Everett Golson
at Florida State, exactly. Yeah. And so that was kind of my thing. I never thought Brennan Armstrong was as good as people made him out to be. And I just felt like he was kind of damaged goods last year, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. Yeah. But we started to see some signs of life from NC State in the last 4 games of the year, Sean. if you look at it in the first, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in the first 9 games of the year, they were only above 5.5 yards per play two times in the first 8 games. That was against VMI and Marshall. They were 4-4 against Notre Dame, 4-8 against Virginia, 3-6 against Louisville, 4-4 against Duke, 4-4 against Clemson, 4-8 against Miami. In the last 4 games, they were 5-7, 5-5, 6-8, and 6-4, including in the bowl game against Kansas State. And so they only rushed for over 200 yards 4 times all year. Actually, let me put it this way. They only rushed for over 180 yards 5 times all year. 3 of those 5 times were in the last 4 games. So you started to see them kind of figured out late. Now it helped they were going against Wake Forest and Virginia Tech and North Carolina and Kansas. But Kansas State, as you have mentioned, very good offense.
Yeah.
And so you started to see some signs of life from that Anai offense. They're getting Grayson McCall, who I'm not a big fan of, but he can run Robert Anai's offense, which is just about, dude, just I'm calling it, just get it. Brendan Armstrong tried to get too cute last year, tried to like make too many plays.
Big play hunting. Yeah.
He got that in his head from he needed to do that the year before. What made him so good the year in 2021 was, dude, just drop back and throw the ball to the open guy. He's going to have some better weapons this year. The Concepcion kid's going to be a year older. So
Noah Rogers, they got him from Ohio State.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they had some young kids playing. They Zeke Correll for them is a good pickup for them. They need that kind of that veteran presence, that leader type of player in there. And I think the system fits what they do very well. They got a solid transfer player from Wake Forest who didn't play a lot because he was buried. Wesley Grimes. They got some players in the portal that I think can help them a little bit, in my opinion. They got the Jordan Waters kid at running back from Duke. He transferred there. He's a good football player. They got a really good tight end from Connecticut to transfer there as well. So they had a good portal offseason. The players are now going into year 2 of what he's doing. So that's the team that's on my radar for. I'm really curious to see how they do, because then Tony Gibson did a great job last year. All the losses they had, and they still were really good on defense. And so that's another one that's on my list of teams that I considered for my top 5 in this one, Sean. What are some others that you consider to be in the top 5 this year? Not guys that for down the road, but guys.
Not really, other than the ones we talked about. Yeah. Everything else is just like, we'll keep a watch on some combinations that are kind of new with coaching changes and everything. I am very interested in the combination at Alabama. I am, because I just know Kalen DeBoer is, the offensive side I trust. The defensive side and the tradition that was there, I want to see what happens.
I loved the hire.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in theory, you went and got a head football coach at a guy that had done a pretty good job of turning that. Kane Womack is who the coach is. He had done a pretty good job of building South Alabama up. This past year they went last 2 years they went 17-9. They kicked the crap out of Oklahoma State this year. He had done a pretty good job there. His dad, if you remember his dad, Sean, as a former defensive coordinator in the SEC, his dad was the OC at Ole Miss under Hugh Freeze.
Yeah.
So he's coaching pipeline. So that was a hire. The Nick Sheridan one on offense, I know nothing about. That's the reason Alabama's not in consideration for me. They're on my teams to look for in 2025, because I need to see, how does Kane Womack going from a head football coach to being an assistant coach. That's not always an easy thing to do. That's not always a transition that people can make.
Yeah.
And so how's he going to be? He was only been a D coordinator for 2 years under Tom Allen at the Power 5 level. His other 6, he was a DC under South Alabama for a couple of years, right? So the track record's not there to be blown away just yet, but there's a lot about that move that I love that I think could pan out, because I haven't liked their last couple of D coordinators. Right. Like Ole Miss isn't considered. Why? Because I don't think Pete Golding's any good. I've been saying this for years. I love the offensive staff, whether you consider it to be Lane or Charlie Weiss Jr. Whoever's running that offense is doing a freaking great job, right? That's all we know. You know what I mean? But I'm just not a Pete Golding guy. Mm-hmm. There's potential for the defensive staff. I just don't know the Nick Sheridan one. But to your point, you got to think Kalen DeBoer is going to be the one to make sure that offense is still pretty good. Right. Just how involved will he be in the offense? That's what I don't know. That's a bit of an unknown for me. But they're on my radar. Here's a couple, Sean, that I have on my eye for 2025. We'll get your thoughts on them real quick. We'll just kind of work through this list real quickly. Clemson. And I'll say here's why Clemson's on my list. I think Clemson showed a lot of potential on offense, a lot of growth on offense later in the year. I thought they did some really nice things in the first half against Notre Dame schematically on both sides of the ball that gave Notre Dame problems. And then once they got the lead in the second half, the offense went into a shell. Why? Because they knew Notre Dame had no chance to score on them in the second half. They were not going to give Notre Dame a short field. But I thought they did some really nice things schematically in that game. They finished the year on a good note. I want to see what they do now in year 3 because I want to see if Dabo's going to allow Garrett Riley to run that offense in a different kind of way. I really want to see it, and that's one that's on my radar. Miami with Shannon Dawson and Lance Guidry is one that I'm going to keep my eye on. I really like that duo at SMU with Rob Likens on the defense and Casey Woods on offense. Plus, you obviously have Rhett Lashley. I want to see how they do in a Power 5 conference. Here's an interesting one, Sean. Iowa. Tim Lester's done some nice things as an offensive coordinator in the past.
Yeah.
You got an elite, you got arguably the best D coordinator in college football in Phil Parker.
Absolutely.
Tim Lester just has to be solid for Iowa to be really, really good.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's an upgrade over if it was a matchup between Brian Van Gorder and Brian Ferentz, Brian Van Gorder would shut Brian Ferentz down.
That's scary.
That's how bad he is. It's terrible. So that's one I got my eye on. The Ole Miss, the Missouri one, the guy that they hired, that Missouri hired this year, Sean, as their OC, is a guy that I never had heard of him before. But when I love their OC, you know that.
Well, Drink is heavily involved.
Right, but he was the D coordinator on that South Alabama team that Womack came from. Right. So I thought that was a strong hire. And there were some rumblings about, DJ Durkin maybe getting that job and a couple other guys that would have not been sexy hires. I ended up liking that pick. And here's another one, Sean, for me. Iowa State.
Yes.
John Heacock's a top coordinator.
Man, they
Nathan
did a great
Shieldhouse
job.
did a really nice job last year in his first year as OC relative to where they were. And some of they had their quarterback got suspended and they had all these. I know Illinois.
Shout out to my Illinois guy.
I knew you'd like this one. But they did some really nice things. Iowa State underachieved in the 2 previous years under Matt Campbell. Mm-hmm. I thought they overachieved last year. When you consider they had the gambling thing, I think their quarterback got suspended and they had all these issues. They were even in the games, some of the games they lost, they were a tough out in some of those games, Sean. Yeah. And I really like the things that they did. We already know John Heacock. I mean, Marcus Freeman interviewed him and thought about hiring him before Al Golden in 2022. Mm-hmm. John Heacock's a good football coach.
Yeah.
But Nathan Shieldhouse, I thought, did a really nice job. I
am going to watch with Loxley. I'm interested in seeing that because I'm like, this is going to be kind of good or kind of bad. We talk about Josh Gaddis, Kevin Sumlin, Brian Williams,
all name team,
and Loxley. Oh, absolutely,
all name team,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one, Sean. Because I think you nailed it. It's either going to be a total disaster, or it. Yeah. You know me. I think Kevin Sumlin's a pretty good offensive mind. I think he did some really nice things at Houston, and I mean he was the head coach when Johnny Manziel won the Heisman. But I don't think he's a head coach. Mm-hmm. But can he adjust to being a coordinator? I don't. And then I'm just not high on Josh Gaddis. That's my big thing. I'm not a big Josh Gaddis fan. Here's another one I like. So obviously the D coordinator at Kansas State's done a really nice job, Joe Klanderman. But they lost Colin Klein because if Colin Klein stays at Texas A&M, stays at Kansas State, doesn't go to Texas A&M, Kansas State's in my consideration for top 5 coordinators. Mm-hmm. A&M would be in my top 5 because of Klein consideration, but they hired Jay Bateman to run the defense. That's a concern for me. Now, Mike Elko is going to make sure Jay Bateman's not as bad as he was in other places, but he's still not going to, he's still Jay Bateman. And so that's not one, but he hired Matt Wells. You remember him? He was the head coach at Texas Tech, and he was also the head coach at Utah State before that. A pretty good offensive mind. Mm-hmm. And so I liked that hire to replace him with, to replace him. And here's another one. Kansas or TCU has Kendall Briles, who's a good offensive mind. They hired Andy Avalos as their D coordinator. Remember, he didn't do a very good job as a head coach at Boise.
No.
But he had built himself up as a pretty good defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
I mean, his Oregon defenses before he took over the Boise job were pretty darn good, in my opinion. So that was a good hire because their defense at even the year they played for the title, their defense at TCU was terrible.
Not good.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
So I do like that one. And those are some of the main ones, Sean, that I kind of have my eye on. And here's another one. BYU made a hire last year on D coordinator, Jay Hill. Guy that has a pretty good reputation. I love Aaron Roderick. You know that as the OC. Mm-hmm. They got to rebuild that defense, and that's one that I kind of got my eye on a little bit this year as well. And then this is one for me. The last one for me is last two for me are Michigan, just because giant unknowns with those two hires. Giant unknowns. I don't think Wink Martindale is a good hire. Ryan does. Yeah. And I've given some credence to what Ryan says because Ryan watches his defense a lot more than me. I have some big reservations for different reasons about how good of a hire that was. Yeah. I know none of us know how good of a hire Kirk Campbell will be. None of us know. That's a guess. But I said this before, Sean. I'm not going to doubt Sherrone Moore again until he gives me a reason to, because he made me look like a fool because I said that was a bad job by Jim Harbaugh. You're coming off the dumpster fire 2020. You're moving your tight ends coach to coach your line. What are you doing? He's young, like he's proven. What are you doing?
Pretty good job.
All he does is win 2 Joe Moores, and then the year they don't win the Joe Moore, they win the national championship. So, as I said, Sherrone Moore, I will not doubt him again until he gives me reason to doubt him. As far as like things like that, but that's a major question mark. And then LSU made a really good hire on a D coordinator job. I like that Blake Baker hire. You hired a guy from the SEC who's proven he could put a pretty good defense on the field. The offensive one is the big question mark.
Absolutely.
Is the LSU spin that we're hearing legit or just typical Brian Kelly spin? They're promoting Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankin. We never heard of anything about Joe Sloan until Mike Denbrock is about to leave. And then all of a sudden, he was really the brains behind the operation anyway, which is not what we've heard from sources. But is Brian Kelly right that those guys can do the job? You don't have Jaden Daniels. I did like the D coordinator hire. If your offense can keep rolling, LSU could be in that conversation next year as well. Not top 5, but be in the consideration. Yeah. I personally don't think the offensive hires were good. I don't. But I did like the D coordinator hire. They certainly upgraded there. They actually got an actual college coach to coach the defense, which is great. But, we're going to see how that goes. So those are some of the ones, Sean, that are on my radar to keep an eye on. And a last one that just popped in my head, Arizona. The head coach they hired, the guy from San Jose, he hired Dino to run Dino Babers to run the offense. Yeah, good hire. And Dwayne Aquina to run the defense. Now, Dwayne Aquina hasn't been a D coordinator very often, but he was considered a really good DB coach for a long time, good recruiter at Texas. Dino was an excellent offensive mind early in his tenure. I mean, he was part of that not Jeff Brom, but he was part of the Art Briles staff at Baylor. He went to Eastern Illinois, put up some monster number. I think he developed Jimmy Garoppolo, I believe, right? Did a great job there, had some really good years at Syracuse, and as he got less and less involved in running the day-to-day, that was the big thing. Dino just wasn't a great head coach. Right. And just he just doesn't have that personality to just really come down hard and there was I've been told there was a lot of disorganization because Dino just wasn't that kick guys in the butt kind of guy. He's just a really nice guy. And sometimes you can't be a nice guy as a head coach, Sean. You got to be a guy that's going to put your foot up people's you-know-whats. Otherwise, people take advantage of you. But now he's back to where he doesn't have to be the one to set that agenda. He just has to coach the offense. And that's where he made his bones. Was putting together really high octane explosive offenses together. Did it at Eastern Illinois, did it at Bowling Green, and had some success at times at Syracuse as well. So that's 2 veteran coaches. I'm going to keep my eye on that Arizona team, and Dino's inheriting some pretty good football players. Yeah, at Arizona as well. Yeah. So those are a couple that I have my eye on.
Getting the quarterback and wide receiver to stay was huge. You don't have Aaron Henry and Barry Lundy Jr.?
No. Sorry, buddy.
So what?
Sorry, buddy. Do not. Don't have your boys. I knew as soon as I wonder how long it's going to take Sean to bring that one up.
You thought I was going to try to put them on the list, didn't you?
No, I knew you
No.
wouldn't. I knew I know your
I
feelings
can't,
on
you
them.
know, I can't stand Barry Lonnie Jr. Dude.
I know your feelings on them. Yeah, it's gonna be now. Oklahoma had a pretty good efficiency defense last year, but I want to see how they replace Jeff Lebby now. So that's a big question mark for me. So anyway, Sean, that's my list, man. Anybody that's missing, anybody that you got your eye on this year that we haven't already talked about? I think we kind of covered them
pretty
all,
much
right?
covered everybody.
Yeah. So that's it. So that was fun, man. So we do have a couple super chats we're going to get to here, a couple questions we'll get to here in a minute, Sean, but enjoyed that conversation. Obviously, we're going to put this one up on the CFB Nation app. You can definitely check it out there. So if you're not subscribed to the CFB Nation app, definitely do that. We would greatly appreciate that and everything we got going on there. Sean and I are going to start a lot more of these RTCF segments. We're going to end up putting on that we talk about college football. We're going to put on there. Sean and I are working on some shows we may start doing as we get through spring ball and some other things that we're working on. So definitely check those out at the CFB Nation podcast app, which you can find Spotify, all your favorite podcast platforms. We're not doing really anything with the YouTube channel for CFB Nation yet, but we eventually will get there. But right now, definitely the podcast part of it on there. And of course, Sean, when it comes to Irish Breakdown, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, and sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So let's get to some super chat, Sean. You ready to rock and roll with these?
Let's do it.
All right. So I'm actually going to flip it up a little bit. Let's keep people on their toes, Sean. I'm actually going to read the questions this time, and I'll let you kick off things with the answers. So we'll start off with my man DMND13. This is Notre Dame's best coordinator duo since when? Best head coach OC DC trio since when? Best overall staff since when? So let's start with the first part, Sean. This is Notre Dame's best coordinator duo since when?
90s, right? I would say Alvarez and
that'd be 89.
Lou was the play. Lou called plays, so Lou and Alvarez
in 1989.
Yeah. Because
so like if you talk to some folks who maybe were a little bit older, and because Jim Strong was the OC in 89 and 88 and 89. But again, as you said, Lou was the play caller, which is the premise of what we're talking about here. Barry Alvarez did obviously phenomenal with those two teams. But if you talk to some people around the program, they'll tell you those early 90 offenses were really, really good. But not a lot of people liked Rick Minner and Gary Darnell.
No.
Those were the issues. No. The coordinators were the issues.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you get into the Davey era, and Davey was a good D coordinator, but he wasn't. I don't think he was he wasn't as good as the reputation maybe that people had. And by then, I don't know that Lou was as locked in to doing. We've heard a lot of things about he was doing more recruiting, or wasn't doing as much recruiting, was doing more of the speaking and things like that, and wasn't quite the same guy he was early on.
Do you think Lou fell prey to teams that made it tough, like in his hires, right? Like, they had close games with Texas A&M. All of a sudden, Bob Davie is like, it's almost like the guys that he faced that he felt like, oh, okay, they gave us a little run for our money. Like, maybe I should bring them here instead of, just going outside of the box. And
that's an interesting take. That's a very interesting take. Who would it be other than?
Because Mentor was the Mentor come. Where did he come from? Pitt? Where did Mentor come from?
Let me go find it real quick. I'll find the Mentor one. Yeah, because Bob Davie came from A&M, although R.C. Slocum obviously was running those defenses. But let's see where Rick Minner came from. Rick Minner previously was coaching before Notre Dame. He was the defense. He was, where we at, 1988. Boy, that guy's coached a lot of dang places. He was at Notre Dame from 92, 93. Before that, he was at Ball State. The coordinator at Ball State. So, now let's look at Gary Darnell. Gary Darnell, before he came to Notre Dame, was at Florida. He was a DC at Florida. So, those are interesting hires.
Yeah.
I think Charlie fell victim to that with John Tenuta.
Yeah.
I think John Tenuta gave him fits in 2006. And he's like, this guy's a really good coach, and he really wasn't. I'll say I think the best OC DC combo in the last, I'll say it's actually the best combo. Here's the combos that are in consideration for me. 2017, Mike Elko, Chip Long, to me was really good.
Yeah.
With all due respect to Clark Lee, who had better defenses than Mike Elko because he built on the foundation that Mike Elko laid.
Mm-hmm.
The Chip Long, Mike Elko 2017 was really dynamic. Chuck Martin, Bob Diaco in 2012 was pretty good as well. Although I don't know that Chuck Martin had as much say as maybe Mike Denbrock had. I would have loved to have seen Mike Denbrock and Mike Elko in 2017.
Yeah.
I really would have loved to have seen that. And you know, you look at Charlie's era. I mean, Charlie was the OC. He never had a good defensive coordinator.
No.
Never. Ty, terrible coordinator combination, especially on offense. I mean, Bill Diedrich, nice guy I've heard, but just no. And then you look at Bob Davie. I mean, Bob Davie had some years where you thought he had made some great hires. I mean, I remember when he hired Kevin Rogers, I was like, hey, this is going to be all right. You know, and Jim Coletto had come from Purdue, and he had a, you know, Jim Coletto, like on paper, this is the thing about Bob Davie. On paper, some of the moves that Bob Davie made a lot of sense. I mean, if you remember, Sean, when he hired Jim Coletto was the head coach at Purdue.
Right.
And and before that, he was the OC at Ohio State and Arizona State. Like, that hire made a lot of sense. But and then he hired Greg Madison was his first D coordinator, was a good football coach. And then he hires Kevin Rogers from Virginia Tech, who had done a really good job at Virginia Tech, at Syracuse. I'm sorry,
right.
with
Donovan McNabb.
He was, because McNabb was in '98. It was his last year, so he was the OC the last 2 years under Donovan, and he was the quarterbacks coach when Marvin Graves was there.
Yeah.
So like but then Davie never let him run the offense the way he wanted to run the offense. That was always the problem. So Davie actually on paper had some pretty good staffs with Jim Coletto and Greg Madison, and then Kevin Rogers and Greg Madison. He just never let the offensive coaches coach.
Mm-hmm.
He was always trying to, he just never let them establish an identity. So on paper, when you look at Charlie, Ty, and Davie actually had the better on paper coaching staffs. He was just kind of the big issue. And he was also suffering from, he was the Manchurian candidate of head coaches. He was the because he went behind Lou's back, and there's a lot of stuff where he kind of got in the right people's and like, hey, we'll prop this guy up because he's going to do what we say.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not going to rock the boat. And he just complained about, you know what I mean? He wasn't rocking the boat because Lou would go in there and just demand stuff.
Right.
You can't do this, Lou. So screw you. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm Lou Holtz. You know what I mean? Like, or Davie was going to kind of, be a go along. Yeah, exactly. And so he was the problem. He actually had some good coaches on that staff. I mean, Urban Meyer was on his staff. I mean, he had some good football coaches on that staff. And what's funny is Ty actually had a pretty good staff. He just had bad coordinators, and he wasn't a very good coach. I mean, but like there was one year, Sean, I forget what year it was. He had Mike Denbrock, Trent Miles, Steve Wilkes. They had some good coaches on their staff. And I actually thought Kent Baer was a pretty decent coach as well. But it was interesting to watch, like, position coach.
Yeah.
It was interesting to watch some of those assistants go on to have success. But he was bad in his coordinator. I mean, his offensive coordinator hires were really bad.
Yeah.
But, 17 in the last 25 years, would you say 17, Chip Long and Mike Elko is the best that we've seen?
Best duo, and then they're probably the best trio.
Yeah. So that's it's kind of that 17, Chip Long and Mike Elko and Brian Kelly, and I would argue on paper this one's better because Chip hadn't really. I mean, Chip was coming off. He had to establish himself. I'm just looking at what they did, what they accomplished.
Yeah.
If you looked at with that group, that trio, that duo would not have been on my radar going into the season because Chip was an unknown. But what he did and what he proved himself to be at Notre Dame was a pretty darn good offensive coordinator. And then obviously Mike Elko was really good. So I'd say 17 was the only one that can compete with this. But this one to me is more proven and established. than that one is, for sure.
Yeah.
Best overall staff since when? Same. I mean, 17 staff was pretty good. You had Harry Heastan on that staff. You know, I'd say this staff top to bottom is better just because, I mean, the coordinator hires are better, but like you're not as good on the O-line, but you're not terrible there.
Right.
I think you're way better at receivers coach. You're way better at running backs coach than you were in 17 with Deland compared to Autry Denson. You know, your D-line coach is potentially a wash. You could argue the 17 D-line coach is better, Mike Elston, and I would argue Mike Elston's better, but it's not tremendously so. And I think Al Washington has a chance to maybe turn that conversation around a little bit. You know, linebackers coach, you know, Max Bull, I thought did a pretty heck of a job. And with all due respect to whoever was coaching the secondary, they're not Mike Mickens. So I think this is the best coaching staff he's had. I mean, the early 90s coaching staffs were excellent. They just didn't have good D coordinators, but the overall staffs were really good. So overall staff, Sean, it's the early 90s, since the early 90s. I mean, you had Joe Moore coaching the O-line. I mean, those are some darn good coaching staffs. So, I mean, anytime you're talking about something's the best since when Lou Holtz was here, that's a place to be. Iden Banami, my man, with the question, do all these hirings and contracts have Pete Bavacqua's name all over it? Well, probably have a signature since he's running things now. But what would you say, Sean? Do you think these are Pete Bavacqua moves? Do you think these would not have happened with Jack Swarbrick? What are your thoughts on that?
I think the apparel deal was in the works. I think they just went through the motions of like hearing from Adidas, hearing from Nike, but I think that had been in the works. Definitely, you know, the funding and getting the funding for all of these upgrades to facilities have been in the works for years. So the only aspect that I think Pete is probably directly connected to would be the TV deal. From a consulting standpoint, I think that was something that probably real negotiations started last year and kind of coincide when Pete was actually having conversations with Jack, having conversations with Marcus Freeman, you know, so that kind of coincides. But the other things, I think the ball was rolling on those things. And that's going to be Jack Swarbrick's legacy.
Right.
His legacy is going to continue for, if Notre Dame wins a championship, right, you're going to have to give Jack some credit.
To your point, Sean, that. Pete Bavacqua is not coming in here as part of a coup to overthrow Jack Swarbrick. Jack Swarbrick had a role in finding his replacement. So, yes, right? I mean, that's yeah. Here's a question, Sean, from Brent Smith. Who is a better football coach, Ryan Day or Brian Kelly?
Brian Kelly.
Yeah, easy answer. That's not even that's not even close.
No.
Not even close.
Nope.
Brent Smith also asked, how many points will Notre Dame average per game in 2024? What's an acceptable number? 35 to 37.5. He's asking if that's an acceptable number.
I think they're going to average over 38. Honestly, when it's all said and done, especially against this schedule, I think they're going to average over 38. Anything under 37 I would be disappointed.
It depends on why. And at the end of the day, Sean, I'll be surprised if it's under 37. But if they're at 36.5, but it's because they're not running the score up. Because like some of the teams that we look at, like the MAC, they're not the MAC teams are somebody. Andrew Gilmore or somebody. Oh, I can't believe they're playing two MAC teams. I'm like, well, Ohio State playing two MAC teams. Penn State's playing two MAC teams. Like this isn't normal. This isn't abnormal. But the thing about the two MAC teams, they were both bowl teams last year. Miami won 11 games. They're not going to go hang 52 on Miami like they did last time, and because they didn't play well against Miami in 17, and they still hung 52 on them. Yeah. If they hang 52 on them this year, it's like that's a heck of a freaking game. All I care about is do they play well against A&M and Louisville and USC and in the post, like those Florida State. That's what I care about.
Yeah,
I think the result will be 37 plus, as it should be. And you know, Mike Denbrock had some offenses that scored pretty good points in Notre Dame in the past, but I mean their offense in 2015 only scored 34.5 points per game.
Yeah,
there were some reasons for that. One of which was your defense was pretty terrible. You know, but that's the thing we're going to find out, Sean, is can they score in the big games? I mean, that 15 offense, as good as it was, they only scored 22 against Clemson. They only scored 19 against BC, 20 against, 24 against Temple. Like they had some of those ugly games, but they were not a very good red zone team that year because Deshaun Kaiser made a ton of red zone mistakes. I think just BC and Temple alone, he threw 4 red zone interceptions in those 2 games alone.
Yeah.
Just so if your quarterback doesn't do that again, then if he's if they were remotely healthy on offense, that's a 38 to 40 point team. You saw it in the first game of the year.
Yeah.
That's an offense that's going to rip people up.
Yeah. You
got Torian Folson and Malik the rest of the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you, Sean. Minimum 37 is the floor for me, my expectation. But if it's 42 and they still don't play well in the big games, I don't care.
Yeah.
Right. If it's 37.1 or 36.5, but they score enough to beat Florida State and those teams to get to the postseason and all. And I also think we need to separate what's the regular season point per game total compared to what the postseason point per game total. Because I have a feeling in this format, we're not going to see the same high-scoring affairs throughout the playoff that we've seen in the past, where in the past you get a month to prepare for the semifinal game and then 10 days to prepare for the title game. This now you got 4 games of that you've got to deal with. So I think with semifinals and championship are going to be a little less scoring than what they were in the semifinals and championship recently.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get through some of these here, Sean. Real quick question here. Andrew Gilmore says, Brian, do we have the speed on offense to win big? I think you and I would both agree, Sean, the answer to that is yes.
I'm going to say yes because I don't want to offend Chris Mitchell.
Well, running back, you got 2 4-4 guys at running back in your starting lineup.
Don't say 4-4 and Chris Mitchell in the same sentence.
Right?
Don't do that.
That's not. It's like, buddy, I'm not disrespecting you. That's still moving.
Like,
Jordan Faison can run. Cam Williams can run.
Yeah.
Eli Raridan's pretty fast for a 6'7" turn. Notre Dame's got plenty. Your quarterback's probably a 4'5", 4'6" guy.
Yeah.
Speed is not Notre Dame's problem. Jordan Faison, very, very, very explosive athlete. How fast is he? I don't know, but he moves really well. I don't know that he's a true burner, but if he's a 4.48, he's a 4.48 step 1.
Yeah.
But yeah, speed on. If Notre Dame's not as good as they need to be this year, Sean, we will not be looking at it. Talking about it, we may use it as a cheap excuse, but speed won't be the real problem that this team has. Here's another one, Sean. What do you think about Matt Luke taking the O-line job at Clemson when Notre Dame wanted him before Joe Rudolph?
Matt Luke would have been he wouldn't have been my top choice during that O-line search. There was a time when you almost felt like he was going to be the guy that ends up in Notre Dame. But this is, let me tell you something. You want to talk about somebody under the microscope on the Notre Dame staff? It's Joe Rudolph this year.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
no doubt.
It's Joe Rudolph.
Doubt.
Like, okay, bro.
I'll say this, speaking specifically about Matt Luke, I think it's a great hire for Dabo.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Luke's a very good offensive line coach.
Yeah.
That's a great hire. And the thing is, he's gonna inherit some pretty talented kids.
That were young, yeah.
He's gonna have a good roster. I think Matt Luke just wasn't a head coach.
No.
Simple as that. And he wouldn't have been if there wasn't all the issues with the coach getting fired for, he's an O-line coach.
Yeah.
That's what he is. And I think he's a pretty good one. I'd have been very happy if he was hired last year. So yes, to your point, Joe Rudolph has a lot to prove. Nicholas Grosh, who are your top recruits at the skill positions in left tackle in the 25 recruiting class, regardless of whether Notre Dame is recruiting those players? I'm not there yet for you, Nicholas. I haven't been able to evaluate enough of the class. Sean, have you? David Sanders at left tackle is an easy answer.
Sanders, right?
Yeah,
that's the kid out of North Carolina, right?
Yeah. Skill positions. I think some of them Notre Dame's recruiting. Taylor, Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary. There's a kid from Cunningham, a receiver I've seen is really good.
Yeah.
There's a couple of, I'd have to go back. There's a couple. I've watched some of the receivers that are. Jamie French is a really good player.
Right.
There's some guys like that. I'd have to go back and look, Nicholas. That's a good question, but that's more of a message board one where I can kind of look through the lists and, oh yeah, I've seen that guy. I've seen that guy. Seen that guy. Those are good players. Here's a comment from Andre Tonsil. He says, in recruiting, I want quality. a player, not just quantity. Quality in a player. Yeah, I mean that's 100% correct, Andre. And that's, to me, Brian Kelly often fell short in one or the other. They either have great quality, but they'd come up short in numbers, or they'd have the numbers and not the impact. Marcus Freeman's last two classes in 23 and 24 hit it in both, Sean.
Yeah.
They met all their needs numbers wise, and they landed impact players on both sides of the ball. And that's why we've said that the ability to acquire talent, the talent acquisition operation at Notre Dame, is tremendously better than it was before. One of the OGs, I haven't seen him in a while, David Knight. If college recruiting classes, this is a great point, Sean, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. If college recruiting classes were rated similar to NFL drafts, it'd be totally different concerning ratings. Did you fill the gaps on your team? He's talking about, like, you don't just rank in NFL draft, hey, you got these 5 players. It's like, okay, This was a need, that was a need. Here's the value you got in that round. And I think that's the ultimate flaw of recruiting rankings, is it does not at all address, did you meet your needs? Yes, you land 10 top 100 players, but it was at the same positions you got top 100 players last year. Your O-line still sucks, and your D-line still sucks, or your quarterback, you know what I mean? And that's the thing that just doesn't take into account. It does not evaluate need, balance, things like that, which in NFL draft, because NFL draft is not a rating system, Sean. It's a subjective, like, okay, here's you had this need and you got the best guy there, or you got a great deal, you got a steal here, you got this guy at 50 when we had him ranked in the top 30 for whatever reason. I think he's right. I think if you look at it that way, people would be looking at these classes a little bit. I mean, would Georgia still be ranked in the top 2 or 3? Yeah. I mean, because they do it right.
Yeah.
Other teams will not be ranked as high every year. A&M would not have had the number 1 ranked class in the country 2 years ago if they took into account need, balance, all those types of things.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to have the world's greatest defensive line, but you're not going to be able to cover anybody, or you're not going to be able to, make tackles at the linebacker level or whatever. Right. Yeah, exactly. It's a great point. We've got a super chat from Andrew Gilmore. Thank you, Andrew. Do you think Matt Rule does his usual major step forward in year 2 at Nebraska?
No. I mean, what's major? I mean, do they get better? Yeah, I think they get better as a team, but I don't think they take a major step.
Well, Nebraska last year went 5-7. And when I look at this Nebraska football team, I mean, there was 3 games they just flat out should have won. And when I look at this football team, Sean, in 2024, I mean, there's a lot to like about what Nebraska can be in 2024, but, dude, their schedule is going to be – I mean, I'll say this, Sean. I would say yes if they weren't adding the teams to the league that they're adding. Because, like, Nebraska wouldn't have to play at USC, wouldn't have to play UCLA. Now, they don't get Oregon or Washington, which is nice. They play at Ohio State. Their schedule is pretty tough this year. They're non-conference, UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa. Should be a 3-0 in those games, but Colorado could be a tougher game. They get Illinois at home, Rutgers at home, at Purdue to start the season. There's a chance they start 5-1. There's a chance they start 6-1 at Indiana. After that, their last 5 games at Ohio State, home against UCLA, at USC, home against Wisconsin, at Iowa. They could go 7-5 this year and be much better as a team than they were in 2023. But it only looks like a 2-game improvement because the schedule's a lot tougher.
That's why I asked. Look, those last 2 games, don't get it twisted. Ending the season with Iowa and Wisconsin, that's tough.
Yeah.
Their season literally might come down to those last 2 games and how they fare.
Yeah. So I would say I think Matt Rule can take a major step forward in year 2. I just don't know that it's going to be reflected in the record the way that we may think. It's not. I mean, if they're 10-2 this year against that schedule with that roster, which is better but not great, he's in the National Coach of the Year conversation. If they go 9-3, that's a heck of a coaching job, but it won't necessarily look like a huge step forward.
Yeah.
If they win 7 or more games, that's a pretty good step forward. If they win 8 or more, then he did a heck of a job. Mm-hmm. So I would say, Sean, if we're looking at it subjectively, I think it would be yes, he can. If we're looking at it Will the record look major step forward? No. I mean, let's just look real quick, Sean, kind of what we're talking about here. So at Temple, they went from 2-10 to 6-6 to 10-4. Can they make a 4-game improvement? Maybe. That's 5-7 to 9-4. Maybe. Are they going to go from 1-11 to 7-6? Are they going to make a 6-game improvement? That means that they go 11-1. No. So record wise, it's not going to be the big jump. To me, it'll be like more like 8-4, 9. I could see them going 8-4, 9-3.
Right.
I mean, if they had anybody other than Jeff Sims on their team in the first month of the season last year, they win 2 more. They go 7-5. I mean, he literally cost them multiple football games. But you're the one that recruited him to go there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of part of it. Last one, Sean. We have a super chat from Sean S. Is there a wide receiver duo on the current roster or on the way that could become as exciting as the Stovall-Samardzija duo? Have missed that. Don't expect to see a pairing as elite as Floyd and Tate again. Well, I think you can see a pairing as elite as them again. I don't know if it's on the current roster, but I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. But Samardzija-Stovall duo, Sean. Do you think that there's any combination on the current roster? Because part of this is like, timing. Cam Williams is a freshman. Chris Mitchell is a 6th year. It's not going to be the same as if Cam was a junior and Chris was a senior, like Stovall and those guys. So they were a year apart.
Cam and Jaden could become that.
Right.
Cam is a sophomore, Jaden is a junior.
Or even junior, senior.
Yeah. They could become that. So
Stovall and Samardzija were juniors and seniors when they had their breakout.
Right.
So, and Floyd and Tate, we never really saw for an entire season.
No, 1 year, right?
I mean, we saw them together for 2 years, 8 and 9.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Floyd missed chunks of the season both times,
right,
with injury,
and
so we never saw him like for a full season.
Yeah.
Stovall, Samardzija. I mean, look, Cam and Faison. I mean, Cam and Micah Gilbert. Gilbert and Great. I mean, like, so that's the thing. There's plenty of combinations that could become that, Sean. I mean, certainly. And then what are they going to add in 25? I mean.
Yeah.
So, I could see that. I could see them. Now, it's going to look different because they're different types of players. But I could see some combination of Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse, Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert, with whatever they get in 2025 that could be Stovall and Samardzija when they get older. Certainly. But I think what could make them so good is that it won't just be Stovall Samardzija with Matt Shelton. It won't be Samardzija and McKnight with David Grimes.
Right.
Right. And then Robbie Parris or whoever else coming off the bench. Like what can make this dynamic is maybe you don't have a 1-2 that's Stovall and Samardzija or Floyd and Tate, but your 3, your 4, your 5, your 6 are going to be way better than the 3, 4, 5, and 6 of those past teams. Like, are they going to have a Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase? No, I don't see that on the current roster now. But I also wouldn't have seen Justin Jefferson be that as a true freshman either.
No.
But I don't see that. But it's more about, but good Lord, this group of 4 or 5 guys with the tight ends are just dynamic. And to me, it's there's you can win that way also.
It's almost like, well, in a different way, because they had a star. I don't know if they had duos, but it just seems like Oklahoma would just have like whoever the seniors were really good, and then they would have a CD Lamb as a freshman. You know what I'm saying? That would get like 5 to 7 snaps a game, make a play, and they just kept.
And then when that guy graduates, the next guy steps in.
Yeah.
Well, like USC had some offenses like that where they had great offenses, but they had like no number 1 receiver.
No,
they had like 3 or 4 really good players.
Yeah,
and
remember Steve Smith was like the 3rd receiver on that 05-06 team, but Steve Smith was making huge plays.
Right.
At Dwayne Jarrett, Steve Smith.
Like Dwayne Jarrett to me was not a star.
No,
I mean, he put up big numbers, but like you said, you had Steve Smith, you had Dominique Byrd, you had Reggie coming out of the backfield. I mean, that's the thing is like you can have depth of talent as well as not, and not just studs, So I think Steve, like, I'm trying to think some different units like that, but like I thought Tennessee was a lot like that. I didn't think any of those Tennessee kids last year were stars. And I know they were drafted high. I thought they were more about they were all very good players, but it was the group of them together is what made them so dangerous. Jalen Hyatt, Brew McCoy, Cedric Tillman, Squirrel White, Ramel Caton. I mean, they had somebody could hurt you in different games depending on who you tried to stop. Somebody could beat you. And so you could take this one guy out of the game, but then this other guy was going to step up and make plays against you, and that's to me what made him really hard to defend. And it also helped them be able to be successful, even though they lost players. I mean, you had Cedric Tillman get hurt, and he doesn't play against Alabama. So Ramel Caton steps in and catches 5 passes for 78 yards. You know what I mean? I mean, Brew McCoy goes out in that game and catches 2 passes for 38 yards. You know what I mean? And of course, Jalen Hyatt went off. So it's that depth of talent plus what they have at tight end and the running back that's going to make it so good. So Sean, my man, that's going to do it. Thank you to the super chats. Why don't you go and take us out of here, man?
Hey, thanks everybody joining us on the RTCF show right here, Irish Breakdown. Don't forget, for all of your recruiting news, intel, and just overall great conversation amongst the Notre Dame fan base and IB Nation, you need to go sign up boards.irishbreakdown.com. It's very inexpensive. You definitely get the bang for your buck. Go to YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Hit the like button. Hit the notification bell and share. And let everybody know Irish Breakdown is the place to be. For Brian Driscoll, I'm Sean Davis. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend. And we'll see you next time right here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.